The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For millennia, Jedi and Sith have shaped civilizations through their mastery of this ancient power. But what happens when something arrives that exists entirely outside the Force's influence? Something so powerful that the very concept of balance becomes meaningless? The answer tears through the fabric of space itself, heralding an apocalypse no one could have foreseen. Imperial scanning stations orbiting Coruscant registered the anomaly 3 seconds before it materialized. Not a hyperspace signature, not a ship, something else entirely. A wound in reality that screamed across every sensor array from the core worlds to the outer rim. The distortion appeared as a crimson tear in the black void, pulsing with energy that made hardened operators stare in disbelief at readings that climbed beyond their instruments' capacity to measure. Through that breach came something that should not exist. Kal-El of Krypton, the last son of a dead world, now corrupted beyond recognition, tumbled through dimensions, trailing fire and fury. In his universe, he had burned away every pretense of heroism after loss had broken something fundamental inside him. He had conquered Earth, crushed all who opposed him, and ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a red cape. But even a god-king can make enemies powerful enough to threaten him, and the dimensional weapon they deployed had torn him from his reality entirely. He didn't fall so much as descend with terrible purpose, his invulnerable body adjusting to new physical laws in microseconds. The twin suns of this strange new system bathed him in unfamiliar radiation, similar to his yellow sun, but different in spectrum. His cells drank it in greedily. Within moments, the disorientation faded. Within minutes, his power began scaling upward. Superman surveyed this new galaxy with eyes that could see across solar systems. Massive ships, primitive by his standards, dotted the space around the city planet below. He could hear millions of conversations simultaneously, languages he didn't know, but patterns he recognized. Fear, ambition, loyalty, hatred. The same emotions that had plagued his Earth, the same weaknesses waiting to be exploited. A squadron of TIE fighters screamed toward him, their twin-ion engines shrieking in the vacuum. He hung motionless as they opened fire, letting the green laser bolts splash harmlessly against his chest. The pilot's panicked transmissions amused him. They had no frame of reference for what he was. How could they? This galaxy clearly relied on technology and some form of mystical energy he could sense but not access. Neither would save them. One fighter exploded as his heat vision lanced through its cockpit. Then another, and another. 6 TIE fighters became expanding clouds of debris in less than 3 seconds. Superman didn't even change expression. He'd long ago stopped counting the dead. More ships were launching from the planet's surface. Larger vessels, capital ships, star destroyers bristling with turbo-laser batteries. They moved into defensive formation with admirable speed. Whoever governed this world had military discipline. That would make conquering them more interesting. But first, he needed information. Superman accelerated, and the universe seemed to bend around him as he approached light speed and atmosphere. The sonic boom that followed his passage shattered windows across 3 districts of Coruscant's upper levels. He decelerated above the massive pyramidal structure his enhanced vision had identified as the center of power, some kind of palace or governmental complex. Energy shields flickered to life around it, layered defenses that would repel any conventional attack. He descended through them like they were soap bubbles. The Imperial Palace's inner sanctum erupted in chaos as alarms shrieked and blast doors slammed shut. Red-armored guards, elite soldiers by their equipment and bearing, took firing positions with weapons raised. Superman landed in the center of their formation, boots cracking the polished floor, and simply stood there as they opened fire. Blaster bolts ricocheted off his suit, his face, his eyes. One guard, braver or more foolish than the others, charged with some kind of force pike crackling with electricity. Superman caught the weapon mid-thrust, crushed it to scrap metal, and backhanded the guard into a marble column hard enough to shatter both. "I want to speak with whoever rules this planet," Superman said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Send them here, now." Through walls and floors, his enhanced hearing picked up frantic communications. Confusion, terror, and then something else. A presence descending toward him, radiating malevolence so profound it would have staggered a normal being. Superman smiled coldly. Finally, someone interesting. The chamber's main doors opened, and Emperor Palpatine entered, flanked by Imperial guards. The ancient Sith Lord moved with deceptive frailty, hooded robes concealing his twisted features. Behind him, a darker shadow, Darth Vader, whose mechanical breathing filled the sudden silence like a death rattle. "How fascinating," Palpatine rasped, yellow eyes gleaming beneath his hood as he studied Superman. "You are strong in... but no, not the Force. Something else entirely." His lips curled into a smile that held no warmth. "Tell me, stranger, what brings you to my empire?" Superman crossed his arms, his cape settling behind him like a blood-stained banner. "Your empire?" He let out a short, harsh laugh. "Old man, I've toppled empires that spanned solar systems. I've killed gods and made planets kneel. This?" He gestured dismissively at the opulent chamber. "This is just my next conquest." Vader's hand moved toward his lightsaber. Palpatine raised one gnarled finger, stopping him. The Emperor's smile widened, revealing rotted teeth. "Bold words, but perhaps you do not understand the power of the dark side of the Force. Perhaps a demonstration?" Lightning erupted from Palpatine's fingertips. Blue-white arcs of pure dark side energy that would have reduced a normal being to ash. The Force lightning struck Superman full in the chest, and for the first time since arriving, he felt something. Pain. Not much. Not enough to truly harm him, but pain nonetheless. Superman's eyes began to glow red. "My turn. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you." The heat vision that lanced from Superman's eyes was concentrated stellar fire, the fury of a sun compressed into twin beams. It carved through the marble floor where Palpatine had been standing a microsecond before, melting stone into lava. The Emperor had moved with inhuman speed, augmented by the Force, putting distance between himself and this impossible threat. "Lord Vader?" Palpatine commanded, his voice strained. "Contain him. I must reconsider our approach." Vader ignited his crimson lightsaber, the blade humming to life. Through the Force, he reached out to touch the stranger's mind and felt nothing. An absolute void where there should have been presence. This being existed outside the Force entirely, a blasphemy against the natural order. "You will kneel before the Empire," Vader intoned, his voice resonating through his vocabulator. Superman's smile was a predator's grin. "Make me." The Dark Lord of the Sith raised his hand, calling upon the Force to crush Superman's throat. The telekinetic grip that had strangled countless victims found no purchase. Vader tried again, pouring more power into the attempt, veins bulging beneath his mask's interface. Nothing. The stranger just stood there, looking almost disappointed. "Is that it?" Superman asked. "That's your magic trick?" He moved faster than Vader could track, crossing 20 meters in a fraction of a second. His fist drove into Vader's chest plate with a sound like a starship collision. The Dark Lord flew backward, crashing through 3 walls before coming to rest in an adjacent chamber. His armor cracked, his augmented body screaming in pain he hadn't felt since Mustafar. Imperial guards rushed Superman from all sides. He dealt with them methodically, almost casually, breaking weapons, shattering bones, ending lives. No wasted movement, no mercy. Just absolute, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. When the last guard fell, Superman turned back toward where Palpatine had been. The Emperor was gone, vanished into the palace's depths. Smart. The old man had recognized a threat he couldn't immediately counter and retreated to regroup. That meant he was dangerous. Not because he could win, but because he could make Superman's conquest take longer than planned. Alarms continued to wail throughout the palace. Through the shattered walls, Superman could see massive warships moving into position above the city. This empire had military might on a scale that impressed even him. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, weapons that could reduce planets to ash. He'd enjoy breaking them all. But first, he needed to understand this galaxy, its power structures, its resources, its weaknesses. The old man in the hood and the half-mechanical warrior were clearly at the top of the hierarchy. There would be others. Generals, governors, rival factions. In his experience, every empire contained the seeds of its own destruction. He just needed to find them and accelerate the process. Superman rose through the hole he'd made in the ceiling, ascending through layers of architecture and defense until he hung once more in Coruscant's upper atmosphere. Below, the city planet stretched in all directions, a testament to civilization's reach. Above, the gathered fleet waited, weapons charged, commanders likely screaming for orders that would never be sufficient. He could destroy them all right now, tear through their ships like tissue paper, reduce their orbital stations to debris, make an example that would echo across this entire galaxy. But that would be wasteful. Fear was most effective when applied with precision. Superman's eyes began to glow again as he selected his first target, the largest star destroyer in the fleet. A massive wedge of Imperial might, bristling with weapons and carrying thousands of crew. He'd let them see him coming, let them fire everything they had, let them realize that nothing in their arsenal could stop him. Then he'd show this galaxy what true power looked like. The Superstar Destroyer Executor hung in high orbit like a dagger pointed at the galaxy's heart. At 19 kilometers of armored death, it was Darth Vader's personal flagship and the largest warship ever constructed by the Galactic Empire. Its crew of 280,000 worked with mechanical efficiency, maintaining weapons systems that could lay waste to entire fleets. None of them had ever encountered a threat they couldn't overwhelm with superior firepower. That was about to change. Admiral Piet stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by tactical displays showing the impossible readings from the intruder. "Target is holding position 3 kilometers off our bow," his sensor officer reported, voice cracking with barely suppressed panic. "Energy signature is, sir, its reading is a single humanoid life form." "That's impossible," Piet snapped. "Recheck your instruments." "Already done, sir. Multiple times. Scanners confirm. One target, human-sized. No ship, no propulsion system we can detect. He's just floating there." Through the bridge's massive viewport, Piet could see the figure with his naked eye. A distant speck against the stars, arms crossed, cape billowing despite the vacuum. Waiting. The Admiral's throat tightened. He'd served under Lord Vader long enough to recognize when something defied natural law. The Force could accomplish miracles, but this felt different. Wrong. "Sir, Lord Vader is returning to the ship," the communications officer announced. "He's ordering all turbo laser batteries to open fire on the target immediately. No warning shots. Full power." Piet's hand hovered over the firing command. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that conventional weapons would be useless against whatever that thing was. But orders were orders, and one did not question Lord Vader. "All batteries," Piet commanded. "Fire." The executor unleashed hell. 60 heavy turbolaser turrets swiveled toward Superman and fired in perfect synchronization, each bolt carrying enough energy to vaporize a city block. Green death lanced through space in converging streams, creating a killing field that nothing could survive. Superman didn't move. The turbolaser fire struck him like rain against a mountain, spectacular, violent, and utterly ineffective. Explosions bloomed across his position, each one bright enough to temporarily blind the bridge crew. When the firing ceased and the light faded, he remained exactly where he'd been, completely unharmed. His suit didn't even show scorch marks. Mother of... The weapons officer's curse died as Superman moved. One moment he was 3 kilometers away. The next, he was at the viewport, his face filling the transparisteel barrier that separated the bridge from vacuum. His eyes glowed crimson, and Piet understood with sudden, terrible clarity that they were all about to die. Heat vision carved through the reinforced viewport like a torch through ice. Atmosphere explosively decompressed, sucking crew members toward the breach. Emergency bulkheads slammed down too slowly. Superman was already inside. Heat vision continuing its arc across the bridge, cutting through consoles, support beams, and bodies with equal indifference. Piet felt himself lifted and hurled against a bulkhead. His last conscious thought was wondering how Lord Vader would punish this failure. Superman surveyed the destroyed bridge with cold satisfaction. Alarms shrieked throughout the massive ship as secondary systems tried to compensate for the catastrophic damage. The vessel was already listing, its navigational systems compromised. Escape pods were launching from multiple decks as the crew abandoned ship. Smart. The ones who stayed would die with their vessel. He could hear them through the walls. Desperate prayers, final goodbyes, officers trying to maintain order as their world literally fell apart around them. Superman felt nothing. He'd heard it all before, on Earth, on the worlds his Justice League had conquered. The sound of defeat was universal. A crimson blade ignited behind him. Superman turned to find Darth Vader emerging from a side corridor, lightsaber raised, his damaged armor hastily repaired, but still showing cracks from their earlier encounter. The Dark Lord moved with careful deliberation, using the Force to anchor himself against the decompressing atmosphere. "You destroyed my ship," Vader stated, his mechanical voice somehow conveying rage beneath its monotone. "I destroyed your bridge," Superman corrected. "The ship's dying on its own. There's a difference." Vader's response was to thrust his hand forward, attempting to hurl Superman through the already breached viewport with telekinetic force. Once again, the Force found no purchase. Frustrated, Vader charged, lightsabers sweeping in a deadly arc towards Superman's neck. The plasma blade connected with Kryptonian skin and stopped it dead. Superman didn't even flinch as the lightsaber, which could cut through blast doors and melt through durasteel, failed to pierce his invulnerable flesh. Vader's shock radiated through his body language. A momentary pause that cost him dearly. Superman grabbed Vader's wrist and squeezed. Mechanical components crumpled like foil. The Dark Lord's lightsaber fell from nerveless fingers, deactivating as it clattered across the deck. Before Vader could react, Superman's other hand clamped around his throat, lifting him off the ground. "I've killed tougher gods than you," Superman said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The only reason you're still breathing is because you interest me. This force of yours, it's not magic. Not really, it's biological. I can hear your midi-chlorians, fascinating little organisms." Vader struggled, bringing his remaining functional arm up to claw at Superman's face. His fingers scraped uselessly against invulnerable skin. The Dark Lord tried to summon Force lightning, but his damaged suit systems couldn't channel the energy properly. He was helpless. Superman carried Vader to the breached viewport and held him out over the void. "Your empire spans how many systems? Thousands? Tens of thousands? And you thought ships and soldiers could rule it forever." He leaned closer, his heat vision reflecting in Vader's cracked lenses. "I'm going to show you what real power looks like. Then I'm going to take everything you've built and make it mine." He released his grip. Vader tumbled into space, arms flailing, his damaged armor unable to protect him from vacuum. The Force could sustain him briefly, but even the Dark Lord's power had limits. He would suffocate within minutes unless retrieved. Superman watched him fall for exactly 3 seconds before streaking after him, catching Vader by the ankle and accelerating toward Coruscant's surface. The planet's atmosphere screamed as they descended, friction heating Vader's armor to dangerous levels. Buildings blurred past. Citizens looked up to see a red and blue streak carrying a black-clad figure like a predator with its prey. They crashed into the Imperial Plaza with enough force to create a crater 50 meters wide. Stormtroopers scattered, their white armor blown away by the shockwave. Superman stood in the center of the devastation, still holding Vader, and hurled the Dark Lord through the plaza's central monument, a massive statue of Emperor Palpatine that shattered into 1,000 fragments. Vader rose slowly, his armor sparking, his respirator damaged and gurgling. Through the Force, he could sense Palpatine's presence in the palace, watching through surveillance systems, calculating. The Emperor would not intervene. Not yet. Vader was being tested, or perhaps sacrificed, to measure this new threat's capabilities. "The Emperor will destroy you," Vader rasped, his voice distorted by his malfunctioning vocabulator. "The dark side is infinite. You cannot..." Superman's fist drove Vader 3 meters into the ground. The impact cratered the plaza floor, buckling permacrete and shattering underground infrastructure. Water mains burst, electrical conduits exploded in showers of sparks. "I don't care about your sides, light or dark," Superman said, standing over Vader's broken form. "I don't care about your Force. I've conquered worlds that had their own magic, their own gods, their own ancient powers. All of them fell. All of them knelt. Your galaxy will be no different." He grabbed Vader by the helmet and lifted him to eye level. "But I'm not unreasonable. Serve me, and you'll have power beyond what your Emperor ever offered. Refuse, and I'll tear this planet apart one city block at a time until someone gives me what I want." Vader's response was to ignite his emergency lightsaber, a backup blade concealed in his armor, and drive it toward Superman's eye. The plasma blade struck his cornea and stopped, unable to penetrate. Superman didn't even blink. Wrong answer. Heat vision at point-blank range melted Vader's helmet, forcing the Dark Lord to roll away or have his head incinerated. His mask was destroyed, revealing scarred tissue and exposed cybernetics. The respirator was gone. Vader was suffocating, his damaged lungs unable to process atmosphere without assistance. Superman watched him struggle for exactly 10 seconds before speaking again. "I could let you die right here. But dead servants are useless. So here's my offer one more time. Serve me, and I'll give you a body that doesn't need machines. I've seen cybernetic surgery in my world. This is primitive, fixable." Vader's yellow eyes widened. Through the Force, he could sense no deception. The stranger wasn't lying. He genuinely believed he could restore what Mustafar had taken. The temptation was overwhelming, a dark whisper that promised everything Vader had lost. But beneath the machine, beneath the dark side's corruption, a fragment of Anakin Skywalker remembered promises from another monster who'd offered everything and delivered only pain. "Never," Vader gasped, his voice barely audible without the respirator. Superman's expression didn't change. "Then suffer." He turned and walked away, leaving Vader dying in the crater. Within seconds, Imperial medical teams would arrive. They'd save the Dark Lord, rebuild his suit, restore his functionality. But Vader would remember this moment, the moment he'd been utterly helpless, offered salvation by a devil, and chosen to refuse. Superman rose into the air, surveying the chaos spreading through Coruscant. Fire and smoke marked where the Executor's debris had crashed into the lower levels. Emergency response teams scrambled to contain the damage. Military assets were mobilizing across the entire planet. Good. Let them mobilize. Let them throw everything they had at him. Each failure would drive home the fundamental truth. They were insects, and he was extinction. His enhanced hearing picked up broadcasts across thousands of frequencies. Military channels, civilian news networks, encrypted governmental communications. Words like alien, invader, and unstoppable dominated every conversation. Fear was spreading faster than any ship could travel. But one conversation caught his attention. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, in chambers shielded against surveillance and Force detection, Emperor Palpatine was speaking with someone. The words were garbled by interference, but Superman's hearing was more than sufficient to pierce the shielding. "Contact the Rebel Alliance," Palpatine was saying. "Yes, you heard correctly. This threat supersedes our conflict. Find their leaders. Tell them the Emperor requests a temporary accord." Superman smiled. The old man was smarter than expected. He understood that conventional warfare was useless, that only something beyond normal tactics could challenge Superman. So he'd unite his enemies against the greater threat. Excellent. Superman had wondered if this galaxy would bore him quickly. Now he knew. There would be challenges here worth his attention. He accelerated upward, leaving atmosphere behind, positioning himself in orbit where he could see entire continents at once. His X-ray vision swept across the planet, cataloging military installations, power generation facilities, and population centers, planning his conquest one sector at a time. This galaxy would kneel. Every world, every government, every being capable of resistance would learn the same lesson his Earth had learned. Superman was inevitable. Superman was justice. Superman was God. And God's answered to no one. The Rebel Alliance headquarters on Yavin 4 had never been designed for visitors of Palpatine's stature or desperation. General John Dodonna stood in the main war room staring at the holographic message that had arrived via encrypted Imperial channels. His weathered face creased with disbelief. Around him, Rebel leadership clustered in stunned silence. Princess Leia Organa spoke first, her voice sharp with suspicion. "It's a trap. It has to be." The message came through channels only Palpatine himself could access. Mon Mothma countered, her diplomatic training warring with her instincts. And the footage. She gestured to the secondary display, showing grainy images of Coruscant's devastation. If this is fabricated, it's the most elaborate deception the Empire has ever attempted. The footage played again. A figure in blue and red, demolishing an entire Star Destroyer bridge with beams of energy from his eyes. The same figure hurling Darth Vader. The Darth Vader through buildings like a child's toy. Orbital debris burning through atmosphere. The Executor, the Empire's most powerful warship, breaking apart in orbit. We've confirmed the Executor's destruction through our own intelligence networks, reported General Riekin, his voice grave. Casualty estimates exceed 200,000 Imperial personnel. The debris field is still raining down on Coruscant's lower levels, civilian deaths. He shook his head. Incalculable. Luke Skywalker stood apart from the others, his hand resting unconsciously on his lightsaber hilt. Through the Force, he could sense something deeply wrong, a disturbance unlike anything Ben Kenobi had described. Not darkness exactly, but absence. A void where presence should exist. Master Luke, General Dodonna asked. You've been quiet. What does the Force tell you? Luke's blue eyes remained fixed on the hologram. Nothing. That's what scares me. When I look at this being, I feel nothing. Like he doesn't exist in the Force at all. But that's impossible. The Force binds all living things. Apparently not all things, Leia said quietly. She moved closer to the display, studying the figure's face, handsome features twisted by cold calculation, eyes that glowed with inhuman fire. What is he? According to Palpatine's message, he calls himself Superman. Mon Mothma read from the encrypted datapad. Claims to be from another universe entirely, displaced by some kind of dimensional rupture. The Emperor's analysts believe he's telling the truth. He possesses no midi-chlorians, no connection to the Force, yet demonstrates abilities that dwarf anything Force users can achieve. Powers like what? Han Solo leaned against the tactical display, his skepticism evident. I've seen Jedi do impossible things. What makes this guy different? Mon Mothma's fingers moved across the datapad. Invulnerability to all conventional weapons, flight at speeds that exceed our fastest starfighters, possibly faster than light. Energy projection from his eyes capable of melting durasteel. Strength sufficient to tear capital ships apart with his bare hands. Enhanced senses that apparently allow him to see and hear across planetary distances. She paused. And, according to Imperial intelligence, these are just the abilities he's demonstrated so far. The war room fell silent. Chewbacca rumbled something in Shiri Wook that didn't need translation. The Wookiee's tone conveyed sufficient dread. So, Palpatine wants us to help him fight this Superman, Han said finally. And in exchange? Temporary cessation of hostilities, shared intelligence, combined tactical planning, and Mon Mothma's voice caught slightly. Access to Imperial resources for a joint military operation. No. Leia's voice cut through the room like a vibroblade. Absolutely not. We don't negotiate with tyrants. Palpatine destroyed Alderaan. He's murdered billions. Whatever this new threat is, we don't ally with genocide. Even if the alternative is extinction. Dodonna's question hung heavy in the recycled air. Princess, I share your hatred for the Empire. But if this being is half as dangerous as these reports suggest, then we find another way. Leia's jaw set with stubborn determination. We always find another way. Luke moved to the viewport, gazing out at Yavin's jungle canopy. The Force swirled with uncertainty, futures branching and collapsing too quickly to follow. But one thread remained constant: death. Massive, incomprehensible death, stretching across star systems. Ben told me the Force maintains balance, Luke said slowly. Light and dark, constantly struggling. But what happens when something exists outside that balance entirely? What happens when the scales themselves are destroyed? Poetic questions won't save lives, kid, Han interjected. We need practical solutions. Maybe this Superman can be reasoned with. Negotiated with. You didn't see his eyes in that footage, Leia countered. That's not someone who negotiates. That's someone who takes what he wants. A proximity alarm interrupted the debate. The communications officer called out urgently. We have an unidentified contact entering the system. No hyperspace signature detected. It's moving at sublight speeds that are off our charts. Trajectory suggests. The officer's voice rose in pitch. It's heading directly for Yavin 4. Impact in 4 minutes. The war room erupted in controlled chaos. Officers scrambled to battle stations. Starfighter pilots raced toward their X-wings. Shields powered up with a rising whine. Luke closed his eyes, reaching out through the Force. The void grew closer, a moving absence that made his teeth ache. It's him, Superman. He's found us. How? Han demanded. We're in the Outer Rim. This base is one of the most secret locations in the galaxy. He heard us, Luke said with sudden certainty, remembering the intelligence reports about enhanced senses. He heard our conversations from orbit around Coruscant. He knows where every rebel cell is located. He knows everything. Mon Mothma's face paled. Evacuate immediately. All personnel to transports. We abandon the base. There's no time, Dodonna stated flatly, checking the tactical display. 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Most of our ships aren't even fueled. We'd be massacred trying to escape. Leia grabbed her comlink. All starfighter squadrons launch immediately. Form defensive perimeter. If he wants a fight, we'll... The base shuddered. Not from impact, but from the shockwave of something massive decelerating from near light speed to a dead stop directly above the temple. Dust rained from ancient stone ceilings. Equipment sparked and flickered. Then he descended. Superman dropped through the jungle canopy like a falling star. Heat vision clearing a path through vegetation that had stood for millennia. He landed in the main courtyard with enough force to crack the stone plaza, sending rebel soldiers scrambling for cover. Luke was the first to reach him, lightsaber igniting in a brilliant blue blaze. He placed himself between Superman and the command center, young face set with grim determination. Superman studied the boy with interest. You're different from the others. I can sense it. Not the Force, I still don't feel that. But you carry yourself like a warrior, like someone who's killed before but wishes he hadn't. Leave here, Luke said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Whatever you want, whatever you're planning, this doesn't have to end in violence. Doesn't it? Superman tilted his head. In my experience, every civilization operates on the same principle. Might makes right. The strong rule, the weak serve. Your rebels fight against an empire because you believe yourselves morally superior. But you still kill Imperial soldiers. You still destroy their ships. The only difference between you and them is who wins. We fight for freedom. You fight because you must. Superman's eyes began to glow faintly. I understand that. I respect it even. But understanding doesn't change reality. This galaxy will kneel to me, boy. The only question is how many die before everyone accepts the inevitable. Luke lunged forward, his lightsabers sweeping in a perfect Makashi thrust. One of the ancient forms Ben had begun teaching him. The plasma blade should have pierced Superman's chest. Instead, it stopped cold against invulnerable skin, the energy crackling and dissipating harmlessly. Superman caught the lightsaber blade with his bare hand. His palm closed around pure plasma without the slightest indication of pain or discomfort. Luke stared in disbelief as Superman crushed the focusing crystal inside the hilt, destroying the weapon with contemptuous ease. "Interesting toy," Superman commented, dropping the ruined lightsaber. "Plasma contained by magnetic fields. Elegant, but ultimately limited to what your body can channel through the Force." He moved faster than Luke could perceive, appearing behind the young Jedi. One hand clamped on Luke's shoulder with crushing force. "I'm not here to kill you, boy. You're far more valuable alive. Someone Palpatine once protected, which means you're leverage." X-Wings screamed overhead, their S-foils locked in attack position. Red laser fire rained down on Superman's position. He stood there. Luke held captive in front of him and let the weapon's fire splash against his body. The bolts ricocheted wildly, several striking rebel positions and causing friendly fire casualties. "Stop shooting!" Leia's voice carried across the courtyard. "You're hitting our own people." The starfighters pulled up, circling uselessly as their pilots realized the horrifying truth. Their weapons were worse than useless. They were actively dangerous to use. Superman's free hand pointed skyward. His heat vision lanced out in twin beams, tracking one of the X-Wings with perfect precision. The fighter exploded, raining burning debris across the jungle canopy. Another beam, another explosion. 3 X-Wings destroyed in as many seconds. "Enough!" Mon Mothma's voice rang out as she emerged from the command center, flanked by rebel guards. "We surrender. Release the boy and we'll hear your terms." Superman smiled. Finally, someone with sense. He released Luke, who stumbled forward, clutching his shoulder where bruises were already forming. "I don't want your base. I don't want your supplies. I want information." "What kind of information?" Mon Mothma asked, every word carefully measured. "Everything." Superman rose into the air, hovering at eye level with the temple's upper platforms. "Your maps of this galaxy, your intelligence on the Empire's military assets, the locations of every major population center, every shipyard, every resource-rich system." His smile widened. "And most importantly, I want to know about the Emperor's weaknesses, what he fears, what could actually hurt him." Leia stepped forward, her voice cold. "You want us to help you conquer the galaxy?" "No." Superman's tone became almost conversational. "I'm going to conquer it regardless. The question is whether your rebellion survives to see what comes after. Help me now, and when I rule, you'll have positions of authority. Refuse?" He glanced at the burning wreckage of the X-Wings. "Well, you've seen what refusal costs." Han Solo emerged from cover, blaster drawn but not raised. "What makes you think we'd ever help you? We've fought the Empire for years. We're not about to trade one tyrant for another." "Because I'm offering you something Palpatine never could," Superman said. "Honesty. I'm not going to pretend this is for your own good. I'm not going to claim I'm bringing peace or order or any other lie rulers tell themselves. I'm going to take this galaxy by force. And I'm giving you the choice to be part of the winning side or die with the losers." He descended until his boots touched stone again. "You have 1 hour to decide." Provide me with the intelligence I've requested, or I start with this moon. I'll carve through your temple stone by stone, person by person, until someone talks. And if that doesn't work, I'll move to the next rebel base, and the next. I have excellent hearing. I know where they all are now. Mon Mothma and Leia exchanged glances. Luke clutched his ruined lightsaber hilt, the Force swirling with dark possibilities. Every instinct screamed at them to refuse, to fight, to die free rather than live as collaborators. But in the jungle beyond the temple, 2,000 rebel personnel sheltered in fear. Mechanics, pilots, medical staff, strategists, the heart of the rebellion's infrastructure. If Superman made good on his threat, the rebellion wouldn't just lose this base. They'd lose everything they'd built. 1 hour, Mon Mothma said finally, her voice hollow. We'll need time to discuss among our leadership. Superman nodded. 1 hour, starting now. He crossed his arms and simply stood there, immovable, inevitable. The rebels retreated to the command center, leaving him alone in the courtyard. Around him, the jungle burned from falling starfighter debris. The ancient temple, which had witnessed the Massassi civilization's rise and fall, now bore witness to something far worse. The moment the Rebel Alliance realized they might be facing an enemy they couldn't defeat. Luke watched through a viewport as Superman waited with infinite patience, a red and blue monument to absolute power. Through the Force, he could sense the turmoil among the rebel leaders. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to run. Some, shamefully, wanted to give Superman what he wanted and pray for mercy. But Luke knew the truth that none of them wanted to voice. There was no fighting this. There was no running. There was no mercy. There was only Superman, and the end of everything they'd fought for. The war room of Yavin 4 had become a pressure cooker of impossible decisions. Holographic star charts flickered above the central table, displaying the full scope of rebel operations, bases, supply routes, sympathetic systems, undercover agents embedded in Imperial infrastructure. Everything they'd fought and died to build, now potentially about to be handed over to a monster. We can't give him this information, Leia insisted, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. Every name on these lists represents someone who trusted us. Families who've risked everything. If we expose them, if we don't, he destroys this base and moves to the next one. General Dodonna interrupted. He knows where they are. He heard our communications from Coruscant. We're not protecting secrets anymore, Your Highness. We're trying to buy time. Time for what? Han demanded. You heard him. Conventional weapons don't work. The Force doesn't work. What exactly are we buying time for? A miracle? Luke stood at the viewport, his prosthetic hand, courtesy of his duel with Vader, clenching and unclenching unconsciously. There has to be a way to reach him. Ben always said there was good in everyone, even Vader, maybe. That thing out there isn't Vader. Leia cut him off. Vader was human once. Anakin Skywalker made choices that led him to darkness. But he was still human underneath. That creature? He's something else entirely. Mon Mothma studied the chronometer. 43 minutes remained. We need to consider our options rationally. First option, we refuse and fight. Outcome, complete destruction of this base and likely several others before he's satisfied he's made his point. Second option, we provide partial intelligence, enough to seem cooperative, but not enough to compromise critical assets. Third option, we give him everything he asks for and pray that cooperation buys us leverage later. There's a fourth option, came a raspy voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to find C-3PO shuffling into the room, his golden plating reflecting the holographic displays. Behind him, R2-D2 beeped urgently. "With respect, 3PO, we don't need protocol droid input right now," Han said, his patience fraying. "Actually, Captain Solo, you might," C-3PO replied stiffly. "R2 and I have been analyzing the footage of Superman's arrival and subsequent actions. R2 has detected a pattern that you might find concerning." The astromech droid rolled forward, projecting enhanced imagery from the Coruscant attack. Frame by frame, Superman's expressions were cataloged. Cold calculation, momentary satisfaction when Vader fell. Slight irritation when the rebel base's weapons proved ineffective. "He's testing us," Luke said suddenly, understanding flooding through him. "Every action he's taken, destroying the Executor, humiliating Vader, coming here. He's measuring responses, learning how this galaxy functions." "Precisely, Master Luke," C-3PO confirmed. "Moreover, R2 has cross-referenced the energy signatures from Superman's heat vision with our database of stellar phenomena. The power output is consistent with a compressed stellar fusion reaction, which suggests he's solar-powered," Mon Mothma finished, her diplomatic mind already racing ahead. "Like a living solar collector, the more stellar radiation he absorbs, the stronger he becomes," Dodonna concluded grimly. "And this galaxy has billions of stars." The implications settled over the room like a shroud. Every hour Superman spent in this galaxy, every moment he absorbed radiation from its countless suns, he grew more powerful. There would be no waiting him out, no war of attrition. Time was his ally, not theirs. "Then we have no choice," Leia said finally, her voice hollow. "We give him the intelligence. We buy whatever time we can. And we pray that Palpatine has something, anything, that can stop him." "Your Highness, are you actually suggesting we trust the Emperor?" General Riekin looked appalled. "I'm suggesting we recognize reality," Leia replied bitterly. "Palpatine has resources we don't. Ancient Sith knowledge, superweapons, the full might of the Imperial Navy. If anyone in this galaxy can counter Superman, it's him. And if that means temporarily setting aside our conflict..." She closed her eyes. "Then we do what we must to survive." Han moved to her side, his hand finding hers. "Sweetheart, if we help Palpatine..." "I know what it means," Leia whispered. "I know exactly what it means. But if we're all dead, the rebellion dies with us. At least this way, we live to fight another day." Luke wanted to argue, to find some third path that didn't involve collaboration with evil. But the Force offered no guidance, only the same oppressive void where Superman existed. Ben Kenobi's voice was silent. The future was a maelstrom of dark possibilities. "We're agreed then," Mon Mothma said, her tone making it clear this was less agreement and more acknowledgement of hopelessness. "Prepare the intelligence packages, everything except our deepest cover agents. Those names we take to our graves. Let Superman have the rest." The chronometer read 37 minutes. Outside, Superman remained exactly where they'd left him. Arms crossed, cape billowing in the wind generated by his own heat signature, warming the surrounding air. His enhanced hearing tracked every word of their discussion through meters of stone and shielding. Fascinating how they struggled with the decision. In his Earth, by this point, most governments had simply capitulated without the moral anguish. This galaxy had spirit. That would make breaking it more satisfying. His X-ray vision swept the temple again, cataloging every rebel position, every weapon cache, every escape route they thought was hidden. The boy with the lightsaber, Luke they'd called him, was particularly interesting. Strong potential, untrained, but naturally gifted, and connected somehow to Vader. The resemblance was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. A family drama, then. Powerful father corrupted by darkness, idealistic son fighting for light. Superman had seen that story play out countless times. It always ended the same way. Either the son died, or he became exactly what he fought against. He wondered which ending this Luke would choose. The temple doors opened. Mon Mothma emerged flanked by rebel guards, carrying a data cylinder. Behind her, Princess Leia, General Dodonna, and the others formed a grim procession. The young Luke brought up the rear, his hand resting on where his lightsaber should have been. "We've prepared the intelligence you requested," Mon Mothma said, her voice steady despite the betrayal this represented. Rebel base locations, supply networks, sympathetic systems throughout the outer and mid-rim. Everything except our deepest cover agents within the Imperial structure. Superman's eyes narrowed. "I said everything. And you'll get everything that doesn't result in immediate mass executions," Mon Mothma replied, steel entering her voice. "Those agents have families, children. If we expose them, Palpatine will make examples. We won't have those deaths on our conscience." For a long moment, Superman simply stared at her. The rebel guards tensed, expecting violence. But instead, he smiled. A genuine expression that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. "You have principles. I can respect that, even if I find them limiting." He took the data cylinder, crushing it in his palm to extract the memory core. His heat vision flared briefly, somehow scanning and copying the data directly into his eidetic memory. "But understand this. I'm not here to save you from Palpatine. I'm here to replace him. The fact that you get to choose your level of cooperation is a courtesy I don't have to extend." "Why?" Luke stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Why do this? You have incredible power. You could be a hero, a protector. Why choose conquest and tyranny?" Superman's expression darkened. "Because I've tried the hero route, boy. I saved my world 1,000 times, stopped every disaster, defeated every villain, protected the innocent, and upheld justice. And you know what I got for it? Criticism, resistance. People terrified of what I might do with my power, never grateful for what I did with it." He began to rise into the air again. "So I stopped asking permission. I stopped pretending that beings with the power to shape civilizations should kowtow to those without it. And I learned something crucial. The galaxy doesn't need heroes. It needs order. It needs someone strong enough to enforce peace, wise enough to know what's best, and ruthless enough to make the hard choices." "That's not peace," Leia called up to him. "That's slavery." "Call it what you want," Superman replied. "The result is the same. A galaxy where conflict ends because I end it, where suffering stops because I decree it, where every being lives or dies by my judgment alone." His eyes glowed crimson. "I am inevitable. I am justice. I am God." He accelerated upward, disappearing into the sky in a sonic boom that shattered windows throughout the temple complex. The rebels stood in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. They'd survived. They'd cooperated. They'd compromised every principle they held dear, and all they'd bought was time, measured in hours, maybe days. "We need to contact the Empire," Mon Mothma said finally. "If Palpatine's offer of alliance still stands, we need to take it. This threat is beyond any one faction." "I'll send the transmission," Leia said quietly, each word tasting like ash. As the rebel leadership dispersed to their duties, Luke remained in the courtyard, staring up at the sky where Superman had vanished. The Force swirled around him, confused and turbulent. Every Jedi teaching he'd absorbed spoke of balance, of the light side ultimately prevailing over darkness. But what happened when the threat wasn't darkness? What happened when it was something the Force couldn't touch? R2-D2 rolled up beside him, beeping sympathetically. Luke knelt down, placing a hand on the droid's dome. "I know, R2. I'm scared too." Across the galaxy on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine sat in his meditation chamber, surrounded by ancient Sith holocrons that pulsed with malevolent energy. Through the dark side, he could sense Superman's movements, not the being himself, but the ripples he caused in the Force. Like a stone thrown into a pond, creating waves that touched everything. Lord Vader knelt before him, his armor reconstructed, his respirator functioning once more. But the Dark Lord's posture conveyed defeat. He'd faced Superman twice now, and been thoroughly humiliated both times. "This being troubles you, my friend," Palpatine observed, his voice a poisonous whisper. "He exists outside the Force," Vader replied. "All my power, all my training, meaningless against him. Even my lightsaber could not pierce his skin. Yet he can be hurt," Palpatine mused. "Your Force lightning caused him pain, even if it did not injure. That suggests vulnerability, however slight." The Emperor's yellow eyes gleamed. "And where there is vulnerability, there is weakness. Where there is weakness, there is defeat. Master, with respect, I do not see how—" "Because you think like a warrior, Lord Vader. You face your enemies directly, matching strength against strength." Palpatine rose from his throne, his twisted frame somehow conveying predatory grace. "But I am Sith. We do not fight battles we cannot win. We change the battlefield itself." He gestured, and a holocron activated, projecting schematics of a massive space station. The Death Star, the Empire's ultimate weapon, capable of destroying entire planets. Superman is powerful, yes, but even gods can die when the ground beneath their feet is annihilated. Palpatine's smile was a rictus of malevolent glee. "He will come for us eventually, seeking to challenge the Empire's might. When he does, we will draw him to a location of our choosing. And then, the Death Star destroys the entire planet with him on it," Vader finished, understanding dawning. "Precisely. Even his vaunted invulnerability must have limits. We simply need sufficient force to exceed them. The combined power of a planet's destruction channeled through the Death Star's superlaser." Palpatine chuckled, a sound like bones grinding together. "That should prove adequate. And if it doesn't?" The Emperor's smile faded. "Then we try alternative approaches. The ancient Sith possessed knowledge of energies that transcended the Force, weapons that could unmake reality itself. I have spent decades recovering these secrets." His gnarled fingers traced patterns in the air. "One way or another, this Superman will kneel or die. The Sith did not survive for millennia by accepting defeat." In orbit above Coruscant, the Death Star's construction proceeded with renewed urgency. Entire fleets of cargo ships delivered materials. Millions of workers labored around the clock. What had been a weapon of terror meant to cow rebellious systems was now a desperate gambit for survival. And across the galaxy, Superman moved from system to system, drinking in the radiation of countless stars, feeling his power grow with each passing hour. He'd learned what he needed from the rebels. Now he would visit key Imperial facilities, shipyards, military academies, research stations, and give them the same choice: serve or burn. Most would serve. They always did, once they understood resistance was futile. He smiled as he accelerated toward the next star system, his cape streaming behind him like a banner of conquest. This galaxy was vast, yes, but he'd conquered vast before. And in the end, they all fell the same way. Not with a bang, but with a whimper, as hope died and pragmatism took its place. Soon, every being from the core worlds to the unknown regions would know his symbol, would speak his name in whispers, would kneel when he passed. Soon, this galaxy would be his. The Quat drive yards stretched across orbital space, like a mechanical serpent wrapped around its planet. Hundreds of kilometers of construction berths, assembly platforms, and manufacturing stations made it the largest shipbuilding facility in the known galaxy. At any given moment, dozens of star destroyers were in various stages of construction, their skeletal frames gradually being clothed in armor plating and weapon systems. Director Bevel Lemelisk stood in the primary control center, his eyes fixed on the sensor displays that had been screaming warnings for the past 30 seconds. A single contact, moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible without hyperspace, had entered the system and was rapidly approaching the shipyards. "Deploy the defense fleet," Lemelisk ordered, his voice steady despite the cold sweat beading on his forehead. "All construction platforms initiate lockdown procedures. Evacuate non-essential personnel to the planetary surface." "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," his communications officer reported. "Audio only. It's him." Lemelisk didn't need clarification. In the 3 days since Superman's arrival in the galaxy, every Imperial facility had received updated threat protocols. The being who destroyed the Executor and humiliated Lord Vader was now considered Priority Alpha, more dangerous than the entire Rebel Alliance combined. "Put it through." Superman's voice filled the control center, calm and conversational. "Quat drive yards. I'm impressed. In my galaxy, we never managed shipbuilding on this scale. Your efficiency is remarkable." "This is a restricted Imperial facility," Lemelisk replied, fighting to keep his voice level. "Approach is forbidden to unauthorized vessels. You will be fired upon if you breach the security perimeter." "I'm not a vessel, Director. And your security perimeter..." There was a pause, then a sonic boom rattled the control center's viewports. "Just breached it." Superman appeared outside the main viewport, hovering in the vacuum of space, arms crossed. Behind him, 3 Imperial-class star destroyers moved into attack formation, their turbo-laser batteries tracking his position. "Open fire," Lemelisk commanded. The star destroyers unleashed coordinated volleys, hundreds of green bolts converging on Superman's position. The barrage was precisely calculated. Overlapping fields of fire, no gaps, no escape vectors. Enough concentrated energy to vaporize a cruiser-sized target. Superman flew through it like a meteor through rain. The turbo-laser fire splashed harmlessly against his body as he accelerated toward the nearest star destroyer. His fist struck the ship's command tower, and the entire superstructure crumpled like tin foil. The star destroyer listed violently, internal explosions blooming along its length as power conduits ruptured. The other 2 destroyers adjusted their firing solutions, but Superman was already moving. He grabbed one ship by its main reactor bulge and used it like a club, smashing it into the second destroyer. Both vessels tumbled through space, their hulls breached in dozens of locations, atmosphere venting in crystalline clouds. 15 seconds. 3 star destroyers neutralized in 15 seconds. Lemelisk's hands trembled as he reached for the emergency comm channel to Coruscant. Before he could activate it, Superman appeared inside the control center. He'd simply punched through the reinforced hull, the viewport, and the interior bulkheads like they were paper. Alarms shrieked. Security officers drew blasters. Superman's heat vision carved a line across the floor in front of them, melting metal into slag. I'm here to talk, not kill, though I can do both if necessary. The officers held their fire, looking to Lemelisk for guidance. What do you want? The director asked, his earlier composure cracking. Superman surveyed the control center, his enhanced vision processing every detail simultaneously. Personnel manifests on data screens, construction schedules, classified schematics. I want you to keep building ships. Same pace, same quality. But from now on, you work for me. The Empire won't allow. The Empire doesn't have a choice. Superman moved to the primary viewport, gesturing at the vast construction yards beyond. You have 47 Star Destroyers in various stages of completion, thousands of smaller vessels, the manufacturing capacity to reshape entire fleets. All of this continues, but it serves my purposes now. Lemelisk's mind raced through options: refuse and die, comply and face Imperial execution for treason, stall and hope for rescue that would never come. And if I refuse? Superman's eyes began to glow. Then I dismantle your entire facility. Every shipyard, every construction platform, every dry dock, reduced to debris. Your workers will have enough time to evacuate, but decades of infrastructure will be lost forever. Your choice. You can't possibly hold territory, Lemelisk argued, grasping for any logical argument. You're one being. Even with your power, you can't occupy systems, can't enforce laws, can't maintain supply lines. I don't need to occupy systems, Superman interrupted. I need people to understand that resistance has consequences. I demonstrate my power once, thoroughly, and then everyone else makes the rational choice. He turned back to face Lemelisk. How many systems do I need to destroy before the rest fall in line? 5? 10? I'm willing to find out. Are you? The director's shoulders sagged. He thought of the 30,000 workers currently on the orbital platforms. Families, children in the residential sectors, all of them utterly helpless against this monster. What are your orders? Lemelisk asked, hating every word. Superman smiled. See? Rationality. Your first priority is completing those 4 Star Destroyers in final assembly. I want them fully operational within 2 weeks. After that, you'll receive new specifications for vessel modifications I have in mind. Your engineers will implement them. The Empire will send fleets to retake this facility. Let them try. Superman moved toward the breached viewport. But I'd suggest warning them that any military approach to Quat will be interpreted as hostile action, and hostile actions. He gestured at the crippled Star Destroyers drifting through the construction zone. Well, you've seen the results. He launched himself back into space, accelerating toward the planet below. Lemelisk watched him descend through Quat's atmosphere, a crimson streak against the blue-green world. Get me Coruscant, Lemelisk ordered quietly. Tell them Quat Drive Yards has fallen. Across the system, similar scenes played out at other Imperial facilities. The research station at Patriim suffered a visit that left its director weeping, and its Death Star scientists working under new management. The military academy on Karida received a demonstration of power that killed 3 instructors who attempted resistance and terrorized 8,000 cadets into compliance. System by system, facility by facility, Superman carved his name across Imperial territory. Not through occupation, but through overwhelming demonstration of force followed by simple ultimatums. Work for me or watch everything burn. And slowly, terribly, the Empire began to fracture. Regional governors faced impossible choices. Resist Superman and risk annihilation. Comply and face Palpatine's wrath. Some chose defiance and died screaming as their palaces collapsed around them. Others chose pragmatism and became collaborators, justifying their choices with whispered arguments about survival and long-term strategy. In the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine convened an emergency session of his inner circle. Moffs, Grand Admirals, and Senior Inquisitors filled the chamber, their faces reflecting varying degrees of fear and rage. 12 major facilities have fallen to the aliens' control in the past 72 hours. Grand Moff Tarkin reported, his voice clipped with barely suppressed fury. Kuat drive yards, Fondor, Corellia's shipyards, 3 research stations, 2 military academies, and the Beskar mines of Mandalore. Mandalore? Vader interjected. The Mandalorians would never surrender. They didn't, Tarkin replied grimly. Death Watch attempted to fight. Superman destroyed their entire clan structure in 14 minutes. The survivors cooperate now. Palpatine steepled his fingers, his yellow eyes gleaming. Interesting. He's not attempting to hold territory directly. Instead, he's creating a network of coerced collaborators. Each facility continues to function, but serves his interests. The Emperor's smile was humorless, almost elegant in its efficiency. Master, we must act, Vader insisted. Every day his power grows. Every facility that falls weakens us further. Oh, I intend to act, my friend. Palpatine activated a holographic display showing the Death Star's current construction status. 94% complete. Super laser calibration in progress. Within 1 week, we will have a weapon capable of destroying entire planets. Let us see how Superman fares when the world beneath his feet is reduced to asteroids. Grand Admiral Thrawn, who had been silent until now, spoke carefully. Forgive me, Emperor, but that assumes Superman will position himself on a planet we're willing to sacrifice. From my analysis of his tactical pattern, he appears to be avoiding predictable positioning. He strikes and withdraws, never remaining in one location long enough for a coordinated response. Then we provide him with bait he cannot resist, Palpatine replied. Something valuable enough to draw him into a trap. What could possibly be valuable to such a being? Tarkin asked. Vader's respirator hissed in the silence. Through the Force, he sensed his master's intentions and felt cold dread. You intend to use my son. Every head in the chamber turned toward the Dark Lord. Palpatine's smile widened. Lord Vader speaks of young Skywalker, currently sheltering with the rebels on Yavin 4. Superman encountered him during his visit to that pitiful moon. According to intelligence reports, he expressed interest in the boy's Force potential. Luke has no connection to this conflict, Vader said, his voice low and dangerous. On the contrary, he has every connection. Palpatine rose from his throne, his twisted form somehow conveying terrible purpose. The boy is strong in the Force, untrained but gifted. Superman is fascinated by things he doesn't understand. We let it be known that young Skywalker will be transported to a specific location, somewhere isolated, militarily insignificant. When Superman arrives to claim this prize, the Death Star obliterates the entire planet. That's barbaric, Grand Admiral Taga protested. Using a civilian target as bait? Would you prefer we sacrifice Coruscant itself? Palpatine's voice cracked like a whip. Make no mistake, Admiral. Superman will come for us eventually. This is not a question of if we face him, but when and where. I choose to control those variables rather than wait helplessly for annihilation." Vader's fists clenched. His son, the last link to Padme, to the man he'd been before Mustafar, being used as bait for a trap that would likely kill him. Every fiber of his being rebelled against it. But what choice remained? If Superman conquered the galaxy, Luke would fall under his dominion regardless. At least this way. There was a chance of eliminating the threat before it became truly unstoppable. "I consent," Vader said finally, the words tasting like poison. Palpatine's cackling laughter filled the chamber. "Excellent. Lord Vader, you will personally oversee the trap's implementation. Grand Moff Tarkin, prepare the Death Star for immediate deployment once testing is complete. Grand Admiral Thrawn, coordinate our remaining fleets into defensive positions around critical systems." His yellow eyes gleamed with malevolent satisfaction. "Gentlemen, we are going to kill a god." The inner circle dispersed to their assigned duties, leaving Palpatine alone with Vader. The Emperor approached his apprentice, laying a withered hand on the Dark Lord's shoulder. "You doubt this decision," Palpatine observed. "I doubt we'll survive it," Vader replied. "Even if the Death Star destroys him, we've shown our hand. Every faction in the galaxy will know we possess a planet-killing weapon. The rebellion will unite against us. Neutral systems will choose sides. We may win this battle and lose everything that follows. Then we must ensure there are no witnesses beyond our control," Palpatine said softly. "The Death Star's first official demonstration will be Alderaan. We'll maintain that narrative. Superman's death will remain classified, known only to the inner circle. As far as the galaxy is concerned, he simply disappeared." Vader turned to face his master. "And if he survives? Then we all die," Palpatine admitted with disturbing cheerfulness. "But I did not survive the Jedi Purge, manipulate galactic politics for decades, and achieve ultimate power by accepting defeat. Superman is powerful, yes, but power has weaknesses. Everyone has a weakness. We simply must be willing to pay the price to exploit it." Meanwhile, Superman stood on the surface of Mandalore, surveying the ruins of what had been Death Watch's central fortress. The Mandalorian warriors had fought well, better than most opponents he'd faced in this galaxy. Their Beskar armor had actually withstood a few blows before crumpling. Their jetpacks and flamethrowers had demonstrated admirable creativity. But creativity without sufficient power was just entertainment. Now the survivors knelt before him, their helmets removed in a sign of ultimate submission among Mandalorian culture. Bo-Katan Kryze, the former leader of Death Watch, stared up at him with eyes full of impotent rage. "You've broken the Mandalorian people," she said hoarsely. "No," Superman corrected. "I've unified them, under me. You'll continue your warrior traditions, maintain your cultural identity. But when I call, you answer. When I command, you obey. In exchange, I leave your people alive. That's not unity, that's slavery. Semantics." Superman's heat vision flared briefly, melting a boulder near Bo-Katan's position. "Your choice was defiance and extinction, or submission and survival. You chose survival. I respect that more than martyrdom." He rose into the air, addressing all the assembled Mandalorians. "You're warriors. I understand warriors. In my galaxy, I fought alongside the greatest warriors Earth had to offer. Some became allies. Some became enemies. All of them learned the same lesson. Individual strength means nothing against overwhelming power. But collective strength, directed toward a common purpose," he smiled, "that can reshape civilizations." "What purpose?" Bo-Katan called up to him. "Order," Superman replied simply. "This galaxy is chaos. Factions warring endlessly, systems destroying each other over ideology and resources. I'm going to end that. By force if necessary, but end it nonetheless. And warriors like you will be the instruments of that order. You'll enforce my peace across systems that resist. We're not your soldiers." "No," Superman agreed. "You're better than soldiers. Soldiers follow orders they don't understand for causes they don't believe in. You'll follow me because you've seen what happens when you don't. That's far more reliable." He accelerated skyward, leaving the Mandalorians to their bitter contemplation. His next destination was already planned. Hoth, where Rebel scouts had reported a new base under construction. Time to remind the rebellion that cooperation was not optional. As he left Mandalore's atmosphere, Superman's enhanced hearing picked up a transmission on an encrypted Imperial channel. Keywords caught his attention: Skywalker, transport, isolated world, capture opportunity. He smiled. They thought they were being clever, dangling bait to draw him into a trap. They didn't realize he'd been listening to every Imperial communication since arriving in this galaxy. Whatever they were planning, likely involving that massive space station currently under construction in the Horus system, he'd see it coming. But he'd go anyway. Not because the trap would work, but because he needed to demonstrate one final time that this galaxy's mightiest weapons were children's toys compared to his power. Let them bring their Death Star. Let them fire their planet-killing super laser. He'd show them what happened when a Kryptonian decided to truly cut loose. The galaxy would watch, and in watching, it would finally, truly understand. Superman was inevitable. The ice planet Hoth had never been intended for permanent habitation. Its frozen wastes, howling blizzards, and sub-zero temperatures made it one of the most inhospitable worlds in the Outer Rim, which made it perfect for the Rebel Alliance's newest base, a network of tunnels and chambers carved into ancient glaciers, far from Imperial scrutiny. Or so they'd thought. General Karlist Riekin supervised the installation of the base's shield generator, a massive piece of equipment that would protect them from orbital bombardment. Around him, engineers worked frantically to complete power conduits before the next blizzard hit. Tauntauns, native creatures adapted to the cold, were being corralled for patrol duty. X-Wings sat in improvised hangar bays, their systems modified to function in extreme cold. "How long until the shield is operational?" Princess Leia asked, her breath fogging in the frigid air despite her thermal suit. 36 hours, assuming no complications," Riekan replied. "Once it's active, we'll be invisible to sensors and protected from anything short of a sustained fleet bombardment." "And if Superman finds us before then?" Riekan's weathered face showed the strain of the past week. Since Yavin 4, the rebellion had been in constant retreat, evacuating bases before Superman could visit them, relocating personnel to ever more remote locations. They'd lost 3 facilities already, not to destruction, but to forced collaboration. Rebels who'd fought the Empire for years now worked under Superman's control, their principles crushed under the weight of impossible odds. "Then we pray the cold slows him down," Riekan said, knowing how hollow that sounded. Leia moved to the viewport carved into the ice, staring out at Hoth's desolate landscape. Somewhere out there, Luke was on patrol with Wedge Antilles, checking the perimeter sensors. Han and Chewbacca were modifying the Millennium Falcon systems for rapid evacuation. Everyone was preparing for the inevitable. "We can't keep running," Leia said quietly. "Every base we abandon, every world we flee, it's not just strategic retreat. It's showing the entire galaxy that we're powerless. We are powerless, Ryukin replied bluntly. Against conventional forces, we're effective guerrillas. Against Superman, we're insects hoping not to be stepped on. Then we find unconventional solutions. Leia turned back to face him. The Emperor's offer of cooperation has gone unanswered from our end, Ryukin interrupted. Mon Mothma refuses to formalize an alliance with Palpatine. She'll accept shared intelligence, but actual military cooperation with the Empire? He shook his head. That's a line most of our personnel won't cross. Leia understood. She didn't like it, but she understood. The rebellion had been built on moral clarity. Empire bad, freedom good. Muddying those waters with Imperial alliances would fracture their movement faster than any of Superman's attacks. But moral clarity didn't stop heat vision from carving through starfighters. It didn't protect against a being who could hear conversations from orbit. It didn't. The proximity alarm shrieked to life. Every screen in the command center lit up with warnings. A single contact had appeared in Hoth's upper atmosphere, descending rapidly with no hyperspace signature, no ship. Nothing but an energy reading that climbed beyond their sensors' capacity to measure. All personnel, battle stations. Ryukin's voice echoed through the ice tunnels. Evacuate non-combat personnel immediately. Starfighters, scramble. But even as he gave the orders, Ryukin knew they were futile. Evacuation took hours. Starfighter deployment took minutes. Superman would be on them in seconds. The Hoth landscape erupted in a geyser of vaporized ice as Superman touched down just outside the base's main entrance. The heat radiating from his body melted snow for 50 meters in every direction, creating a crater of exposed rock and steaming water. He stood there calmly, cape billowing in the frigid wind, and simply waited. Inside the base, Luke Skywalker rushed toward the command center, his training with Ben Kenobi screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. Through the Force, he felt the same terrible absence he'd experienced on Yavin 4, a void where life should register. Superman had found them. We have to evacuate, Luke said as he burst into the command center. Already in progress, Ryukin replied, his fingers dancing across tactical displays. But we won't get everyone out in time. Then I'll buy us time. Luke reached for his replacement lightsaber, a crude weapon he'd constructed from components salvaged after Superman destroyed his first one. If I can talk to him, Luke, no. Leia grabbed his arm. He's not here to talk. He's here to claim another facility. Then we destroy the base, Han interjected, arriving with Chewbacca. Set the reactor to overload, collapse the tunnels, bury everything. We leave nothing for him to use. That's thousands of hours of work, Ryukin protested. Supplies, equipment, the shield generator, all worthless if Superman controls them, Han countered. Look, I've seen this play out before on smuggling runs. When a bigger predator shows up, you don't protect your cargo. You dump it and run. Pride's expensive. Survival's priceless. Luke closed his eyes, reaching out through the Force. Outside, Superman remained stationary, his enhanced senses tracking every conversation, every movement within the base. He wasn't attacking. He was letting them stew in their fear, watching them debate and panic, and ultimately accept defeat. It was psychological warfare, and it was devastatingly effective. He's listening to us right now, isn't he? Luke said suddenly. Everything we're planning, every word we say, he can hear it all. The command center fell silent as that realization sank in. They had no secrets, no element of surprise. Every tactical decision would be known to their enemy before they could implement it. Then we have nothing to lose, Leia decided. She moved to the communications console and opened a channel to the surface. Superman. This is Princess Leia Organa of the Rebel Alliance. We know you can hear this. We're willing to discuss terms. For a long moment, only static answered. Then Superman's voice filled the command center, transmitted through some method that bypassed their equipment entirely. He was simply vibrating the air molecules to create sound waves. Terms. How civilized. His tone carried dark amusement. Here are my terms. Continue your rebellion against the Empire. In fact, intensify it. I want the Emperor's resources stretched as thin as possible. Confusion rippled through the command center. Ryakan and Leia exchanged bewildered glances. You want us to fight the Empire? Leia asked carefully. I want chaos, Superman clarified. The Empire is powerful but inflexible. Palpatine rules through fear and centralized control. You rebels represent decentralization, unpredictability. By keeping you active, I force the Empire to waste resources on suppressing you. Resources they might otherwise direct toward opposing me. Luke felt sick as understanding dawned. We're not even threats to you. We're just tools, a distraction. Everything is a tool when you have sufficient power, Superman replied. You rebels have your uses. The Empire has its uses. Even the Jedi and Sith, in their own ways, serve my purposes. The sooner you all accept your roles in the New Order, the less suffering occurs. And what is your new order? Leia demanded, rage replacing fear. A galaxy where everyone exists only to serve your ego? A galaxy where conflict ends because I end it, Superman corrected. Where petty ideological struggles and resource wars become irrelevant because one authority, mine, supersedes all others. Your rebellion fights for freedom. The Empire fights for order. I'll give you both. Freedom to live as you choose within the order I establish. That's not freedom, Luke said. That's a prison with better decoration. Superman's heat vision lanced through the ice above the command center, carving a hole that let frigid air pour in. He descended through it, landing in the center of the room with crushing force that buckled the floor. Rebels scrambled for weapons, but Superman raised one hand in a placating gesture. I'm not here to kill you, he said, his voice now conversational rather than broadcast. Killing you would be counterproductive. I need you alive, fighting, making the Empire paranoid and overextended. His eyes found Luke. Especially you, boy. Skywalker, isn't it? You're valuable. Why? Luke's hand tightened on his lightsaber hilt. Because Vader is your father. Superman stated it as simple fact, not revelation. The command center erupted in shocked exclamations. Leia gasped. Han cursed. Chewbacca roared. But Luke stood frozen, the Force suddenly screaming confirmation of what every instinct had denied. That's impossible, Luke whispered. I can hear heartbeats, Superman said. Yours and Vader's share identical arrhythmic patterns, a genetic marker. I can see bone density through your skin. Yours matches his pre-cybernetic scans that I accessed in Imperial medical databases. And your force potential? He smiled coldly. You're the son of the Chosen One. That makes you leverage against both Vader and the Emperor. Luke ignited his lightsaber, the green blade humming to life. I won't be used. Everyone is used, boy. The question is by whom? Superman's eyes began to glow faintly. Your father was a slave, then a Jedi, then a Sith. He spent his entire life serving masters who claimed to offer freedom while demanding obedience. I'm more honest. I tell you directly, you will serve my purposes, willingly or not. Then not, Luke said, and charged. It was a futile gesture born of desperation and rage. Luke's lightsaber swept in a perfect arc, enhanced by the Force, fast enough to blur. Superman caught the blade between two fingers, stopping it cold. Then he yanked the weapon from Luke's grip, crushed the hilt, and backhanded the young Jedi across the room. Luke crashed into a computer console, pain exploding through his ribs. Through the Force, he reached out desperately, trying to telekinetically hurl equipment at Superman. Chairs, datapads, even chunks of ice tore free and flew toward the Kryptonian. Everything bounced off harmlessly. The Force is impressive, Superman acknowledged, brushing debris from his suit. But it requires concentration, training, and power drawn from midi-chlorians. I've faced telekinetics in my galaxy who could move mountains. You're not even close to that level yet. He moved to where Luke had fallen, reaching down to lift him effortlessly by the collar. But you could be. With proper training, sufficient time, maybe decades of dedication, you might become powerful enough to inconvenience me. Might. His grip tightened slightly. Which is why I'm not killing you, boy. You're my insurance policy against your father and the Emperor. As long as you live, they'll hesitate. And hesitation is weakness. Luke. Leia raised a blaster, knowing it was useless but unable to stand idle. Superman's heat vision flashed, melting the weapon in her hands. She cried out, dropping the superheated metal. Han moved to draw his own blaster, but Chewbacca held him back, the Wookiee's centuries of wisdom recognizing hopeless situations. Your evacuation is proceeding nicely, Superman observed, his enhanced hearing tracking the transport ships launching from hidden hangar bays. 17 vessels have already achieved orbit. At current rates, you'll have this base emptied in 4 hours. I'll allow it. He released Luke, who collapsed, gasping. But I'm taking your shield generator. My facilities need better defenses, and this equipment will serve well at Quat drive yards. Superman turned to Ryekon. You have engineers who understand the system. Send 5 of them with me. Voluntarily, or I'll select them randomly. Ryekon's jaw clenched. I'll go myself. No, you won't. You're needed here to organize the evacuation. Superman's gaze swept the room. But your cooperation is noted. 5 engineers report to the generator chamber in 10 minutes. Fail to comply, and I start melting your transports before they clear atmosphere. He ascended through the hole he'd made, leaving the command center in shambles. Within seconds, he was gone, ascending to orbit to oversee the evacuation and ensure his orders were followed. Luke struggled to his feet, pain radiating from his ribs. Vader was his father. The revelation should have devastated him, but shock had numbed everything except determination. If Superman thought having Skywalker blood made Luke weak, made him leverage, the Kryptonian didn't understand the Force at all. We need to contact the Emperor, Leia said, cradling her burned hand. Whatever differences we have, Superman is the greater threat. If Palpatine has a plan, he does, came a voice from the shadows. Everyone spun to find an Imperial probe droid hovering near the damaged ceiling. Its optical sensors focused on Luke specifically. When it spoke again, the voice was Emperor Palpatine's, transmitted across light years through the Force and technology combined. Young Skywalker, your father has informed me of Superman's interest in you. This presents an opportunity. The mechanical voice carried malevolent satisfaction. The Death Star will be operational within 48 hours. We require bait to draw Superman to a specific location. You, boy, will be that bait. No, Leia said immediately. We don't sacrifice our people. You'll sacrifice him, or you'll sacrifice entire star systems, Palpatine interrupted. Superman grows stronger with each passing day. Soon, no weapon in our arsenal will touch him. The Death Star is our only chance. But we must lure him to a planet we're willing to destroy, somewhere isolated, militarily insignificant. And then you fire your superweapon and kill Luke along with Superman, Han said bitterly. Real noble plan, your wickedness. Lord Vader believes his son can be evacuated before the weapon fires. I'm less optimistic. But necessary sacrifices have always defined great victories. The probe droid rotated, its sensors sweeping the devastated command center. The alternative is extinction, not just for the Empire or the Rebellion, but for every living being in this galaxy. Superman has no intention of ruling. He intends to own, to reduce every sapient creature to property. Luke stood slowly, the Force settling around him with cold clarity. This was why Ben had trained him, why his father had fallen and risen again, why the Force had brought him to this moment. Not to fight Palpatine or redeem Vader, but to face a threat from beyond the stars. I'll do it, Luke said quietly. Luke, no. Leia moved to stop him, but he gently pushed her back. If there's even a chance this works, we have to take it. Luke met her eyes, seeing his own fear reflected there. Superman is right about one thing. I am valuable, because I represent hope. And as long as hope exists, he hasn't won. The probe droid emitted a sound that might have been Palpatine's laughter. Such nobility. So like your father before his fall. Very well, young Skywalker. Proceed to the coordinates I'm transmitting. A shuttle will collect you. Lord Vader himself will oversee your transportation to the designated world. The droid self-destructed, leaving no evidence of the communication. Riekin stood speechless, processing the insanity of what had just been decided. You're actually going to trust Palpatine? The Emperor who blew up Alderaan? I'm going to trust the Force, Luke replied, though his voice wavered slightly. If I die stopping Superman, at least I die for something that matters. Han grabbed Luke's shoulder, spinning him around. Kid, this is suicide. You know that, right? Even if the Empire's plan works, you're going to be at ground zero when they test-fire a planet killer. I know. Luke smiled sadly. But what's the alternative? We keep running, keep watching Superman claim system after system until there's nowhere left to hide. He shook his head. Someone has to stand against him. Might as well be a farm boy from Tatooine. Leia embraced him fiercely. May the Force be with you, she whispered. Always, Luke replied. As the rebels continued their evacuation, Luke prepared for what might be his final journey. The Force swirled around him with unprecedented intensity, futures colliding and fragmenting. He saw flashes, the Death Star's super laser firing, Superman's eyes glowing crimson, Vader's mask cracking, an explosion that consumed planets. And through it all, one constant: sacrifice. The Jedi had always known that true power required sacrifice. Now Luke would learn if that sacrifice could save a galaxy from a god who refused to die. The planet Scarif had once been an Imperial stronghold, home to a massive data vault and citadel that housed the Empire's most sensitive secrets. The Rebel Alliance had raided it years ago, extracting Death Star plans at terrible cost. Now it sat largely abandoned, its tropical beaches and turquoise waters untouched by the war that raged across the galaxy. It was the perfect place for a trap. The Death Star hung in orbit like a malevolent moon, its super laser array fully charged for the first time in its operational history. On the battle station's bridge, Grand Moff Tarkin stood with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. Planetary shield is holding at maximum strength, his operations officer reported. Target subject has been confirmed on the surface. All Imperial personnel have been evacuated to minimum safe distance. And our guest? Tarkin inquired. Lord Vader reports the boy is cooperative, though reluctant. The officer consulted his datapad. He's being held in the former Imperial facility at coordinates 479, visible from orbit with standard sensors. Excellent. Superman's enhanced vision will detect him easily. Tarkin's thin lips curved into something approximating a smile. Now we simply wait for our target to take the bait. In the station's meditation chamber, Emperor Palpatine sat surrounded by ancient Sith holocrons, their crimson light casting his twisted features in demonic shadow. Through the Force, he could feel the web of fate tightening around this moment. Billions of possible futures collapsed into a handful of outcomes, all balanced on the edge of a single decision. Would Superman come for the boy? Yes. Palpatine could sense it with the certainty granted by decades of manipulating destiny. Superman's arrogance wouldn't allow him to ignore such obvious bait. He would come, confident in his invulnerability, certain that no weapon could harm him. The Sith Lord's yellow eyes gleamed with malicious anticipation. They would see. On Scarif's surface, Luke Skywalker sat in what had once been Director Krennic's office, now stripped of everything except a simple chair and viewport overlooking the beach. Stormtroopers had deposited him here an hour ago with instructions to wait and pray. Luke didn't pray. He meditated, sinking into the Force as Ben had taught him, searching for clarity in the chaos of possible futures. But the Force offered only confusion. Too many variables, too many unknowns. Superman existed outside its natural flow, a disruption that turned prophecy into guesswork. The door hissed open. Darth Vader entered, his respirator the only sound in the sterile chamber. "Father," Luke said, the word still strange on his tongue. Luke. Vader's mechanical voice carried undertones Luke hadn't noticed before. Pain, perhaps, or regret. "You understand what will happen here. The Death Star fires, Scarif is destroyed, Superman dies, if he can die. And I..." Luke met the dark lenses of his father's mask. "I might die too. The Emperor has ordered my ship to remain in orbit until the final moment. When Superman arrives, I will descend and extract you before the weapon fires." Vader moved to the viewport, gazing out at the tropical paradise that would soon become a debris field. "I will not fail you as I failed your mother." "My mother." Luke stood, approaching his father carefully. "Did you love her?" Vader's breathing hitched just slightly. More than the Force itself. More than power, more than the dark side. More than my own life. His gloved hand clenched into a fist. "I killed her. My anger, my fear. I choked the life from the only being who ever saw good in me. And for what? Empty promises from a Sith Lord who sees all of us as tools. Then help me," Luke urged, "not by extracting me, by stopping this madness. Superman is wrong about this galaxy, but Palpatine's no better. They both see people as property. Help me find a third way." "There is no third way." Vader turned from the viewport. "There is only power and those who wield it. Superman has demonstrated power beyond anything I imagined possible. The Death Star represents the pinnacle of Imperial might. When they collide, one will be destroyed. If Superman survives, the galaxy falls to his dominion. If the Empire's weapon prevails, Palpatine's tyranny continues unchecked." His respirator hissed. Either outcome is darkness. Then we make our own light, Luke insisted. The Force showed me once that there's still good in you. Anakin Skywalker isn't completely dead. He's just buried under pain and regret. But he could. Anakin Skywalker was weak. Vader's voice rose to a roar. He failed everyone he loved. He fell to the dark side and burned for it. I am what remains, Lord Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, the terror of the rebellion. He leaned closer, his mask mere inches from Luke's face. And I will save you, boy. Because you are my son. Not because of sentimentality, but because you represent my legacy. The Empire will not take that from me. Before Luke could respond, both Jedi and Sith felt it simultaneously. A disturbance in the Force like reality itself screaming. Vader's head snapped toward the viewport. Luke's enhanced senses, sharpened by the Force, detected the impossible. A single life form entering Scarif's atmosphere at a velocity that should have incinerated any living thing. Superman had arrived. He descended through tropical clouds like a meteor wrapped in red and blue, decelerating to a gentle landing on the beach below the facility. Sand fused into glass beneath his boots from the heat of atmospheric entry. He stood there for a moment, adjusting to Scarif's dual suns, their radiation different from other systems he'd visited, tinged with exotic particles that made his cells sing with power. His X-ray vision swept the building before him, cataloging every structural detail, every hidden weapon, every life form. Luke Skywalker stood in an upper chamber, flanked by Darth Vader. Nearby, empty rooms suggested recent evacuation. And above, in orbit, Superman's enhanced vision pierced atmosphere and space itself, analyzing the massive battle station that loomed over the planet. The Death Star. He'd heard rumors of its construction, seen fleeting references in stolen Imperial documents. A weapon capable of destroying planets, powered by some kind of massive hypermatter reactor. He smiled. So this was their play. Lure him to a planet, fire their superweapon, hope the blast killed him. Creative, he'd give them that. More ambitious than most traps he'd encountered. Luke Skywalker. Superman's voice carried across the beach, through the facility's walls, enhanced by his control over air molecules. I know you're in there. I know this is a trap. And I'm going to spring it anyway, because I want your empire to understand something fundamental. I don't fear their weapons. He rose into the air, drifting toward the building with casual confidence. Come out, boy. Bring your father. Let's have a conversation before they fire their moon-sized gun. In the chamber, Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber. I'll hold him off. You escape to the shuttle. Now. No. Luke placed his hand over his father's. If we run, he chases. If we stay, maybe we can reach him. Find some humanity underneath the power. He has no humanity, Vader stated flatly. I've touched the minds of countless beings through the Force. Their thoughts, their emotions, all leave impressions. Superman? Vader's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. There's nothing there, just void, not darkness that I could work with, just absence. Then we fill that absence with something other than fear, Luke said. Before Vader could argue further, Superman punched through the reinforced wall like it was paper. Durasteel and permacrete exploded inward, showering the chamber with debris that Luke deflected with the Force. Vader ignited his lightsaber in one fluid motion, placing himself between Superman and his son. How noble, Superman observed, dusting fragments of wall from his suit. The father protecting his child. That's almost touching. "You will not have him," Vader stated, his crimson blade humming with barely contained energy. "I don't want him, Vader. I want you to watch what happens next." Superman gestured at the viewport, where the Death Star was clearly visible in orbit. "Your Emperor thinks his weapon can kill me. I'm going to let him try. And when it fails, when I'm still standing in the crater where this planet used to be, I want you to carry that message back to Palpatine. Nothing in this galaxy can stop me." "You're insane," Luke said. "That weapon destroys planets, entire worlds. Even if you survive the initial blast, you'll be floating in the vacuum with nothing." "I don't need atmosphere," Superman interrupted. "Or food, or water, or warmth. I need solar radiation, and this galaxy has plenty of that. The only question is whether I let your father extract you before the fireworks begin. Call it a gesture of respect for his persistence." Vader's grip on his lightsaber tightened. Through the Force, he could sense his master's anticipation in orbit, could feel the Death Star's reactor building to critical levels. Minutes, perhaps seconds, remained before the weapon fired. "Luke," Vader said quietly, "go, now." "But, go!" The Dark Lord's command carried the weight of the Force itself, compelling obedience. Luke stumbled backward, his Jedi training warring with his instinct to stay and fight. But he could feel his father's determination, could sense that Vader intended to buy him escape time at any cost. As Luke fled toward the landing pad where a shuttle waited, Superman made no move to stop him. Instead, he studied Vader with something approaching curiosity. "You're willing to die for him," Superman observed. "Interesting. I thought the Sith rejected attachment, considered it weakness." "The Sith embrace passion," Vader corrected. "And there is no greater passion than the love a father has for his son." His lightsaber swept in a defensive pattern. "If you pursue him, you go through me." "I already went through you twice," Superman reminded him. "But I admire the commitment." His eyes began to glow. "One more time, then, for old time's sake?" Vader struck first, calling upon decades of lightsaber mastery and dark side power. His blade moved in patterns too fast for normal eyes to follow, each strike aimed at joints, throat, eyes, anywhere that might conceivably be vulnerable. The Force augmented his speed, his strength, his precognition. It wasn't enough. Superman blocked each strike with his bare hands, the plasma blade incapable of cutting Kryptonian skin. When Vader tried to force choke him, Superman's biology simply didn't respond. When the Dark Lord hurled debris telekinetically, Superman batted it aside like gnats. "You're trying," Superman acknowledged, catching Vader's lightsaber mid-swing. "I respect that, but trying isn't enough." He yanked the weapon from Vader's grip and crushed it, then grabbed the Dark Lord by the throat. Unlike their previous encounters, Superman didn't throw him. He simply held Vader there, suspended, helpless. "Feel that?" Superman asked conversationally. "That's helplessness. That's the knowledge that all your power, all your training, all your connection to the Force means nothing against sufficient physical superiority." His grip tightened slightly. Every being in this galaxy needs to feel this at least once. Then they'll understand why resistance is pointless. Vader struggled, his damaged lungs screaming for air his crushed throat couldn't provide. Through dimming consciousness, he reached out with the Force one last time, not to attack Superman, but to touch his son's mind across the kilometers. "Luke, I'm sorry. For everything. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become." Then darkness claimed him, and Vader went limp in Superman's grip. Superman released him, letting Vader's body crash to the floor. Unconscious, not dead. He'd been sincere about not wanting to kill them. Corpses couldn't spread fear, couldn't tell others about their defeat. His enhanced hearing tracked Luke's shuttle launching, climbing toward orbit. Good. The boy would witness what came next from a safe distance. He'd see the Death Star fire, see Superman endure, see the Empire's ultimate weapon fail. And then the real conquest would begin. In orbit, the Death Star's superlaser array reached full charge. Tarkin gave the order with cold satisfaction. Fire. 8 separate beams converged into a single lance of concentrated energy, brighter than a star, carrying enough power to overcome a planet's gravitational binding energy and tear it apart at the molecular level. The beam lanced downward, covering the distance between station and planet in microseconds. Superman looked up, his enhanced vision tracking the beam's approach. At the last possible moment, he could have dodged. His speed exceeded light, giving him ample time to escape. He didn't move. The superlaser struck Scarif dead center, and the planet began to die. The initial impact vaporized the facility, the beach, the oceans. Everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius simply ceased to exist. The beam penetrated through crust and mantle, destabilizing the planetary core. Secondary explosions rippled outward as tectonic plates shattered and magma geysers erupted worldwide. And in the center of it all, Superman stood in the beam itself, letting the concentrated energy wash over him like rain. It hurt. Not much. Not nearly enough to injure. But for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Superman felt genuine pain. The superlaser's exotic particles, hypermatter reactions channeled through kyber crystals, contained something his invulnerability couldn't completely negate. Fascinating. As the Scarif tore itself apart around him, Superman analyzed the sensation. The beam wasn't cutting him, wasn't burning him, but it was taxing his cellular structure in ways conventional weapons couldn't. If this continued for hours, maybe days, it might actually hurt him, but it wouldn't continue. Already the beam was weakening as the Death Star's reactor cycled down. The weapon needed time to recharge, time he wouldn't give them. Superman flew upward through the disintegrating planet, through the dissipating superlaser beam directly toward the Death Star. Behind him, Scarif's final death throes played out, the planet cracking into massive fragments, atmosphere burning away, oceans evaporating into space. Luke's shuttle, fleeing toward hyperspace, turned its sensors back just long enough to capture the impossible. Superman emerging from planetary destruction, ascending toward the Empire's ultimate weapon, completely unharmed except for slight scorch marks on his suit. The rebellion would see that footage. The Empire would see it. Every faction in the galaxy would see it and understand. Conventional weapons, even planet killers, couldn't stop him. Superman landed on the Death Star's surface with enough force to buckle hull plating. His heat vision began carving through the outer armor, cutting toward the reactor that powered this monstrosity. If they wanted to fire superweapons at planets, they could do it without their favorite toy. Alarms screamed throughout the battle station. Tarkin's face went pale as reports flooded in. Hull breaches on the primary surface, intruder moving toward the reactor core. No weapon system could get a clear shot. All stations, concentrate fire. Tarkin commanded. Turbo lasers, ion cannons, everything. Destroy that target. Thousands of weapons swiveled toward Superman's position and fired in a desperate barrage. The concentrated firepower that could have obliterated a fleet splashed harmlessly against Kryptonian physiology. Superman didn't even slow down as he burrowed deeper into the station's superstructure. In his meditation chamber, Palpatine felt the tremors and knew with cold certainty they'd failed. The Empire's ultimate weapon, its final defense against this intergalactic threat, had proven insufficient. The Emperor began making contingency plans. If brute force couldn't stop Superman, perhaps manipulation could. Everyone had weaknesses: ambition, attachment, ego. Superman clearly possessed the last in abundance. Perhaps that could be exploited. But first, survival. Palpatine rose from his throne and made his way to the escape pods. Pride was expensive. Living to scheme another day was priceless. Superman reached the Death Star's reactor core, a massive hypermatter chamber that pulsed with barely contained energy. His X-ray vision analyzed its structure, understanding the principles instantly. Elegant design, actually. Efficient. Under other circumstances, he might have preserved it for study. Instead, his fists began to pummel the reactor shielding. Each blow struck with the force of a meteor impact, cracking containment fields, rupturing fuel lines, destabilizing the delicate balance that kept the reactor from going critical. On the bridge, Tarkin watched his screens in horror as system after system failed. "Evacuate the station. All personnel to escape pods. This is not a drill." But even as crews scrambled for escape routes, Superman accelerated his assault. The reactor's fail-safes, designed to prevent catastrophic overload, were being systematically destroyed. Within minutes, the entire station would become a bomb large enough to sterilize nearby space. Superman punched through the final containment layer and exposed the reactor core itself. A swirling vortex of hypermatter that radiated enough energy to power a moon-sized battle station. He smiled coldly, then released a sustained burst of heat vision directly into the core. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. The hypermatter destabilized, entering cascade failure. Superman flew upward through the breach he'd created, emerging from the Death Star's surface just as the reactor exploded. The blast was visible from neighboring star systems, a brief new sun that outshone Scarif's debris field. The Death Star, the Empire's most powerful weapon and symbol of its absolute authority, ceased to exist. Millions of tons of metal and technology scattered across space as expanding plasma. Superman hovered in the void, cape billowing despite the vacuum, and watched his handiwork with satisfaction. Behind him, escape pods scattered like fleeing insects. He let them go. They'd spread the word faster than he ever could. The Empire's ultimate weapon had failed. Superman remained. In one of those escape pods, Grand Moff Tarkin sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of their defeat. Beside him, Emperor Palpatine's hologram flickered, transmitted from his own escape craft. This changes everything," Tarkin said hoarsely. "Indeed," Palpatine agreed, his voice oddly calm despite the disaster. "We underestimated him. That will not happen again." "Master, what weapon do we possibly have left?" "The Death Star was a crutch," Palpatine interrupted. "One I regret relying upon. But the Sith survived for millennia without superweapons, Lord Tarkin. We survived through cunning, manipulation, and the power of the dark side itself." His yellow eyes gleamed with renewed malice. "Superman has power, yes. But power without wisdom is merely strength. And strength can be redirected, turned against itself." Tarkin didn't understand, but he'd learned long ago not to question the Emperor's machinations. If Palpatine saw a path forward, that would have to be enough. Across the galaxy, on the rebel base ship that had replaced Hoth, Luke Skywalker watched the transmitted footage of Scarif's destruction and the Death Star's annihilation. Around him, rebel leadership stood in horrified silence. "He survived a planet killer," Mon Mothma whispered. And then he destroyed the Death Star itself. "We're out of options," General Dodonna said flatly. "The Empire's gone. The rebellion's irrelevant. Superman has effectively won." "No." Luke's voice cut through the despair. "He's powerful, yes, but he's not invincible. Did you see it? When the super laser hit him, he felt pain. For just a moment, he felt something." "That doesn't help us, kid," Han interjected. "We don't have a Death Star anymore. That was the only weapon that even scratched him." "We don't need a Death Star," Luke replied, the Force crystallizing around a desperate idea. "We need kyber crystals. The super laser was powered by them. Their energy is what hurt him. If we could find a way to weaponize kyber energy without needing a planet-sized battle station." Leia's eyes widened with understanding. "The Jedi temples. They had massive kyber deposits. And there are ancient Sith strongholds rumored to contain even more powerful crystals." "You're talking about Force-based weapons," Mon Mothma said carefully. "That's unprecedented." "So is Superman," Luke countered. "We need unprecedented solutions. And we need them from the one person in this galaxy who might understand both the Force and advanced technology well enough to make it work." Everyone turned to look at him. "My father," Luke said quietly. "Darth Vader. If he survived Scarif's destruction, if Palpatine will allow it, we need his help." The idea was insane, asking the Empire's greatest enforcer for assistance. But sanity had died with Scarif. All that remained was survival, by any means necessary. Darth Vader's shuttle emerged from hyperspace in the Mustafar system, its black hull scorched from Scarif's destruction. The Dark Lord had regained consciousness in an escape pod mere seconds before the planet's final fragmentation, his connection to the Force allowing him to telekinetically shield himself from the worst debris. But the experience had left him weakened, his already damaged body pushed beyond its limits. Now he stood on the bridge of an Imperial Star Destroyer, staring at the holographic projection of Emperor Palpatine. Behind the Emperor, the ruins of the Imperial Palace on Coruscant smoldered. Superman had visited the capital in the hours following the Death Star's destruction, carving his symbol into the building's facade as a message. A giant S visible from orbit, a declaration of ownership. "The boy survived," Palpatine said, his voice carrying bitter satisfaction. "As did you, my old friend. Providence, perhaps, or the Force ensuring its champions endure." "The Force ensured nothing," Vader replied, his respirator laboring. "Superman allowed Luke to escape. He wanted witnesses to his invincibility. And he has them. The entire galaxy watched the Death Star's destruction. Panic spreads faster than hyperspace travel." Palpatine's hologram leaned forward. "But fear is a weapon that cuts both ways. If Superman can make them fear him, we can make them fear what happens if they serve him. Master, we lost our primary weapon. Our most secure facilities fall daily to his conquest. What leverage remains?" Palpatine's smile was a rictus of malevolence. "Leverage? None. But I have something better. Knowledge. Ancient knowledge the Sith have preserved for millennia. There are powers in this galaxy older than the Republic, older than the Jedi Order itself. Powers that exist outside conventional understanding of the Force." Vader's helmet tilted slightly. "You speak of the world between worlds, the Mortis gods, I speak of reality itself, Lord Vader." Palpatine's eyes gleamed with fanatic intensity. "The Force is not merely an energy field. It is the foundation of existence in this galaxy. Every atom, every quantum interaction, every living thought, all connected through the Force. Superman exists outside that connection, yes, but he still exists within our reality. What are you suggesting? That we change the rules. Palpatine's hologram flickered as interference crossed the transmission. There are places where the Force concentrates, where the barriers between dimensions grow thin. Ancient Sith lords attempted to weaponize these locations, to tear holes in reality itself. They failed because they lacked sufficient power and knowledge. His smile widened. I have both. Vader felt cold dread seeping through his connection to the dark side. Master, the rituals you describe, they're forbidden even among Sith. To unmake reality, to unravel the Force itself, would destroy Superman. Palpatine finished, along with everything else in the affected region. But necessary sacrifices have always defined great victories. If we must render entire sectors uninhabitable to eliminate this threat, so be it. And if the ritual fails, if it unleashes something worse, then we die knowing we tried everything. Palpatine's hologram began to fade, the transmission degrading. Prepare the Sith fleets. We make for Malachor 5. The ancient Sith temple there contains the knowledge we need. And Lord Vader? The Emperor's voice dropped to a poisonous whisper. Your son has contacted us. He wishes to speak with you about cooperation. Vader's hands clenched into fists. Luke is idealistic. He believes redemption is possible, that there's still good in you. Palpatine interrupted with mocking laughter. How touching, how naive. But his naivety may serve our purposes. Meet with the boy. Let him believe there's hope for alliance between Empire and Rebellion. While he dreams of unity, we'll prepare our final gambit. The transmission ended, leaving Vader alone with his thoughts and the cold whisper of the dark side. His son wanted to speak, wanted to believe Anakin Skywalker could be saved. And Vader wanted to believe it too, even knowing such hope was poison. Through the Force, he reached out across the void, finding Luke's presence like a candle in darkness. His son burned bright with determination and fear in equal measure. So young, so unprepared for what was coming. Just as Anakin had been all those years ago. 3 days later, on a neutral moon in the Outer Rim, a Lambda-class shuttle touched down beside the Millennium Falcon. Luke emerged flanked by Leia and Han, their hands close to weapons, but not drawn. From the Imperial shuttle, Darth Vader descended alone, his black armor stark against the moon's pale dust. Father and son stood 20 meters apart, separated by ideology and pain, but connected by blood and the Force. You came, Luke said, breaking the silence. You are my son. Vader's mechanical voice carried unexpected emotion. I will always come when you call. Leia stepped forward, her diplomatic training warring with her hatred of the man who tortured her, who destroyed so much she loved. We're here to discuss an alliance. A real one, not the half measures we've attempted before. Against Superman, Vader stated. It wasn't a question. Against extinction, Luke corrected. He's not going to stop. Every day, more systems fall. More facilities come under his control. He's building something, a network of power that spans the entire galaxy. Once it's complete, once he has the infrastructure to enforce his will everywhere, simultaneously, then resistance becomes impossible. Vader finished. I understand. I've studied his tactics. He doesn't occupy worlds. He co-opts them. Makes them complicit in their own subjugation. It's efficient. It's evil, Leia snapped. Evil is a matter of perspective, Your Highness. Vader's respirator hissed. From Superman's view, he's bringing order to chaos, ending suffering through absolute control. The Empire's philosophy, taken to its logical conclusion. If you believe that, why are you here? Han asked, his hand resting on his blaster. Because I've seen what absolute control costs. Vader's gaze, invisible behind his mask, but palpable through the Force, fixed on Luke. I became a monster to save what I loved. In doing so, I destroyed it. Superman walks the same path, unable to see that the power he wields has already corrupted him beyond redemption. Luke moved closer, reaching out tentatively through the Force. He felt his father's pain, sharp and constant. Physical and emotional both. And beneath the pain, regret, deep, soul-crushing regret. Help us stop him, Luke urged. Not for the Empire, not for the rebellion, for the galaxy itself, for everyone who will suffer under his rule. Vader was silent for a long moment, the Force swirling between them. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Luke had never heard before. The Emperor has a plan, a desperate, insane plan that may destroy us all, but it's the only weapon we have left that might work. What kind of plan? Leia demanded. Sith rituals, ancient practices that manipulate reality itself through the dark side. Vader's helmet turned toward the sky, where stars glittered in the eternal night. There are places where the Force concentrates, where dimensional barriers weaken. Malachor 5 is one such place. Palpatine believes that with sufficient power and the right ritual, we can unmake Superman, erase him from existence. That's impossible, Luke said. The Force binds living things, but it doesn't control fundamental reality. You're young and poorly trained, Vader interrupted, not unkindly. The Force is far more than the Jedi taught. It is reality in this galaxy. Everything that exists through the Force. Superman is an anomaly, something from outside our dimensional framework. If we can manipulate the Force at a fundamental level, we can reject his existence, push him back to wherever he came from. Han whistled low. That sounds like it could go wrong in about 1,000 ways. Undoubtedly. Vader's agreement was grim. The ritual requires immense power, more than any single Force user possesses. It will need light and dark side practitioners working in concert, Jedi and Sith, together, for the first time in millennia. Leia's eyes widened. You're asking us to help Palpatine perform a Sith ritual. I'm asking you to help save the galaxy, Vader corrected. Palpatine's motivations are irrelevant. If this ritual succeeds, Superman is eliminated. If it fails, we die trying. Either outcome is preferable to submission. Luke felt the Force churning with unprecedented intensity. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that followed. Trust his father, work with the Empire's darkest practitioners, risk unleashing powers no one fully understood, or refuse, maintain moral purity, and watch Superman consume the galaxy system by system. Ben Kenobi's teachings whispered warnings. The dark side was seductive, corrupting. Sith rituals were abominations that violated the Force's natural order. To participate in such a working would be to compromise everything the Jedi stood for. But the Jedi were dead. The Sith were broken. And Superman was inevitable unless someone did something impossible. I'll do it, Luke said quietly. I'll help with the ritual. Luke, no. Leia grabbed his arm. What choice do we have? Luke met her eyes, his own haunted. We tried conventional warfare. We tried superweapons. Nothing works. If there's even a chance this ritual succeeds, we have to take it. "The boy's right," Vader said, though his participation comes with a price. The ritual requires Force users at the peak of their power. Luke is strong but untrained. He'll need instruction in both light and dark side techniques. "I won't teach him darkness," Luke insisted. "Then he'll die the moment the ritual begins," Vader replied flatly. "This working will tear at his spirit with dark side energy. Without understanding how to channel and resist it, he'll be consumed. Better to learn control now than face annihilation later." Leia looked between Luke and Vader, seeing the terrible logic in the Dark Lord's words. "If Luke agrees to training, what do you need from the rebellion? Force-sensitive operatives, whatever Jedi survivors remain in hiding, every being with even latent Force potential." Vader's respirator wheezed. "The ritual requires at least a dozen practitioners. More would be preferable. We gather at Malachor 5 in one standard week." "And Superman?" Han asked. "He's going to notice a bunch of Force users gathering in one place." "Undoubtedly." Vader's acknowledgement carried dark amusement. "In fact, we're counting on it. The ritual needs an anchor, a focal point for the dimensional rejection. Superman himself will serve that purpose. We lure him to Malachor, initiate the working, and use his own existence as the target for reality's rejection." That's... Luke struggled for words. "That's using him as a weapon against himself. Poetic, isn't it?" Vader turned back toward his shuttle. "1 week, Luke. Use the time to prepare. Meditate. Make peace with whatever gods you believe in. Because what we're about to attempt has never been successfully completed in recorded history." "Why not?" Leia called after him. Vader paused at the shuttle ramp. "Because everyone who tried it died screaming as their connection to the Force was severed and their bodies unraveled at the molecular level." His respirator hissed. "Pleasant dreams, Princess." The Imperial shuttle launched, leaving the rebels standing in a stunned silence. Luke stared at the stars, the Force whispering dark prophecies he couldn't quite decipher. 1 week until they attempted the impossible. 1 week to master techniques that took Jedi decades to learn. 1 week until they either saved the galaxy or destroyed what remained of it. "Kid, you sure about this?" Han asked quietly. "No," Luke admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." Far across the galaxy, Superman stood in the throne room of what had been the Imperial Palace, now his seat of power. Around him, holographic displays showed his growing empire. 73 major systems under direct control. Hundreds more cooperating through coercion or pragmatic acceptance. The transformation had taken mere weeks. At this rate, the entire galaxy would be his within months. His enhanced hearing picked up transmissions from across known space. Some were mundane: trade negotiations, planetary governance, civilian communications. Others were more interesting: encrypted Imperial channels discussing Malachor 5 and dimensional rejection ritual. Superman smiled. So Palpatine had found something ancient and dangerous. Some Sith working that supposedly could eliminate threats to reality itself. How? Ambitious. He could destroy Malachor now, prevent the ritual before it began. But where was the sport in that? Let them gather. Let them perform their ceremony. Let them throw their mystical powers against his invulnerability. When it failed, and it would fail, the galaxy's last hope would die with it. Then, finally, truly, there would be no one left to oppose him. His cape settled around him as he sat upon the throne that had been Palpatine's. The symbol he'd carved into the palace facade glowed in the setting sun, his mark on this galaxy, indelible and eternal. Soon, every world would bear that mark. Every being would speak his name. Every heart would know that Superman was not merely a conqueror, but a fundamental fact of existence, as inevitable as gravity, as inescapable as death. He closed his eyes and drank in the solar radiation streaming through the throne room's massive viewports. Power coursed through every cell, boundless and eternal. He'd never felt stronger, never felt more alive. Let them try their ritual. Let them gather their Force users and ancient knowledge. Let them believe hope remained. When he crushed that hope personally, the galaxy would finally understand. There was no escape. There was no salvation. There was only Superman and the new order he would impose with an iron fist. 1 week. They had 1 week to prepare for annihilation. He could wait that long. After all, gods had nothing but time. Malachor V hung in space like a wound in reality itself. The planet's surface was cracked and blackened, scarred by an ancient superweapon that had killed millions in an instant. The very air seemed to scream with the echoes of their deaths. Jagged obsidian spires jutted from barren plains, and at the planet's heart stood the Sith temple, a massive pyramidal structure that pulsed with dark side energy so profound it could be felt across star systems. Luke Skywalker stood at the temple's entrance, his new lightsaber hanging at his belt, his spirit trembling with the effort of maintaining calm. Around him, the gathered Force users represented the galaxy's last desperate gambit. 7 Jedi survivors pulled from deep hiding, 5 Imperial Inquisitors sworn to Vader's command, 3 Night Sisters from Dathomir practicing their dark magics, and 2 ancient Force-sensitive mystics whose allegiance belonged to neither light nor dark. 18 souls, united by necessity, preparing to attempt the impossible. Emperor Palpatine stood at the temple's apex, his twisted form silhouetted against storm clouds that roiled with unnatural fury. His yellow eyes gleamed with fanatic anticipation as he surveyed the assembled practitioners. Beside him, Darth Vader maintained vigilant watch, his connection to the Force extending outward to monitor for Superman's inevitable arrival. This ritual was designed by Darth Vitiate. Palpatine's voice echoed across the temple grounds, amplified by the Force itself. A Sith Emperor who ruled for over 1,000 years by consuming entire planets' life forces. He sought to unmake reality itself, to become a god beyond the Force's constraints. He failed, but his research survived. The Emperor raised his gnarled hands, and ancient Sith holocrons materialized around him, their crimson light casting demonic shadows. The ritual of dimensional severance requires 3 components: sufficient Force energy to tear through reality's fabric, an anchor point where dimensional barriers are weakest, and a target whose existence we wish to reject. Malachor provides the weak point. One of the Jedi survivors, a Twi'lek named Shak Ti who'd escaped Order 66, stated, "The ancient weapon used here created permanent damage to this reality structure." "Precisely," Palpatine confirmed, "and we provide the energy, light and dark side practitioners working in concert, our combined power exceeding anything achieved before." But the target, his smile was a rictus of malice. The target must be present and aware. Superman must stand at the ritual's center, his existence serving as the focal point for dimensional rejection. "How do we keep him there?" Luke asked. "He's faster than light. The moment the ritual begins, he could escape." "We bind him," Vader replied, his mechanical voice resonating with dark purpose. "Not physically, that's impossible. But through the Force, we can create a localized reality anchor. A field where dimensional stability is so compromised that even his speed becomes meaningless." He'll be able to move, but movement won't translate to distance. Like running on a treadmill while reality itself holds him in place. Leia stood with the rebel delegation, Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, and a handful of rebel soldiers who'd insisted on being present despite their inability to contribute to the Force working. And if this fails? If Superman survives? Then everyone on this planet dies, Palpatine said simply. The backlash from a failed ritual of this magnitude will consume us all. Our atoms will be scattered across dimensions, our consciousness fragmented into infinite suffering. There is no survival scenario if we fail, only the manner of our annihilation. Han Solo, standing beside Leia, muttered something profane under his breath. Love these no-pressure situations. Really brings out the best in people. A Night Sister named Marin stepped forward, her pale face marked with ritual scars. The ritual requires absolute synchronization. Light and dark must flow together without conflict. Yin and yang. Creation and destruction balanced perfectly. One practitioner falling out of harmony collapses the entire working. Which is why we've spent the last week in preparation, Shak Ti added. She turned to Luke. Young Skywalker has made remarkable progress, but he's the weakest link, no offense intended. None taken, Luke replied, though his jaw tightened. The past week had been torture, learning to channel dark side energy without being consumed by it, mastering light side healing to counterbalance the corruption, pushing his underdeveloped powers to their absolute limits. He'd barely slept, barely eaten, spending every waking moment in meditation and practice. And still he knew, with terrible certainty, that he wasn't ready. Vader approached his son, speaking quietly enough that only Luke could hear. When the ritual begins, you'll feel the dark side trying to pull you under. Your fear, your anger, your pain. It will magnify them 1,000-fold. You must acknowledge these emotions without surrendering to them. That's impossible, Luke whispered. The Jedi teachings say to release emotion, to find peace. The Jedi teachings are why the Order fell, Vader interrupted. Emotions are part of being alive, Luke. Denying them doesn't eliminate them. It just lets them fester until they explode. His respirator hissed. I learned that lesson too late. You still have time to learn it properly. Luke met his father's gaze, invisible behind the mask, but palpable through the Force. If we survive this, will you come back? Will Anakin Skywalker return? Anakin died on Mustafar, Vader said, his voice heavy with ancient pain. But perhaps something new can be born from the ashes, if we survive. A disturbance in the Force rippled across the planet, causing every practitioner to stiffen simultaneously. Shak Ti's head Leku twitched. The Inquisitors ignited their lightsabers reflexively. Even Palpatine's confident smile faltered momentarily. He's here, Vader announced unnecessarily. Superman descended through Malakor's atmosphere like a fallen god, his cape streaming behind him, his eyes glowing with crimson anticipation. He'd listened to their preparations, heard every word of their planning through his enhanced hearing. The ritual they described was fascinating. A working that supposedly could unmake his existence itself. He wanted to see them try. He landed in the temple's central courtyard, his boots cracking the ancient stone. Around him, the assembled Force users took their positions, forming a circle with Palpatine at the apex and Luke at the base, light and dark side practitioners alternating to maintain balance. So this is the grand plan, Superman observed, his voice carrying across the courtyard. A mystical ritual to erase me from existence. Creative. More creative than the Death Star, I'll give you that. You came knowing it was a trap, Palpatine called down. Arrogance or curiosity? Both, Superman admitted cheerfully. I've conquered galaxies, Palpatine. I've faced gods and demons and everything between. Your force is just another form of energy, another system to understand and overcome. I came because I want to show you, definitively, finally, that nothing in this galaxy can challenge me. Then you'll die proving it, Vader stated. Superman's smile widened. We'll see. Palpatine raised his hands, and the ritual began. The Force erupted like a supernova, light and dark side energies intertwining in patterns that hurt to perceive. Every practitioner channeled their full power into the working, their voices chanting in ancient Sith and forgotten Jedi dialects. The very air began to shimmer as reality's fabric strained under the assault. Luke felt the dark side slam into him like a physical blow. His fears materialized with hallucinatory clarity. Visions of his friends dying, of the galaxy enslaved, of himself becoming another Vader. The temptation to surrender, to let the darkness consume him and end the pain, whispered seductively. But he held firm. Through the Force, he felt his father's presence anchoring him, felt the other practitioners' determination strengthening his resolve. They were all in this together, light and dark, Jedi and Sith, united for one impossible moment. The reality anchor formed around Superman, invisible but palpable. He tried to move and found his motion strange. He was running at light speed, but distance no longer correlated with movement. The courtyard remained exactly where it had been, his position unchanged despite his acceleration. Interesting. Superman tested the barrier with his heat vision, carving through stone and metal but unable to pierce the dimensional distortion surrounding him. He punched the air, and the shockwave dissipated into twisted space that led nowhere. Clever, he acknowledged. You've trapped me in a localized dimensional pocket. Very clever. The chanting intensified. Palpatine's voice rose above the others, his mastery of Sith sorcery directing the ritual's flow. Reality itself rejects you, outsider. You are not of this galaxy, not of this dimension. We cast you out. We unmake your existence. We... Superman's eyes began to glow brighter. My turn. He released his full power, not just heat vision, but the totality of energy stored in his Kryptonian cells. Stellar radiation accumulated over weeks of absorbing this galaxy's countless suns erupted outward in an omnidirectional wave. The blast was visible from orbit, a sphere of pure energy that would have vaporized continents. The Force users screamed as the energy struck their ritual working. The carefully balanced energies destabilized. Two Inquisitors collapsed, their connection to the Force severed by the overload. One of the Night Sisters ignited into flames and burned to ash before anyone could react. But the ritual held. Barely, Palpatine poured more dark side energy into the working, his body withering further as he sacrificed his own life force. Shakti and the other Jedi matched him, drawing on the light side with such intensity their bodies began to glow. And Luke, caught between light and dark, felt something unprecedented, the two energies merging within him, not conflicting but complementing. Gray force, neither light nor dark, but something transcendent. Power flowed through him with clarity he'd never experienced, and he understood with sudden certainty what needed to happen. The ritual needs sacrifice, Luke shouted over the roar of conflicting energies. Not just power, true sacrifice. Someone has to anchor the dimensional rejection with their own existence. No. Vader's mechanical voice cracked with emotion. Luke, don't. But Luke was already moving, walking forward through the maelstrom of Force energy towards Superman's trapped position. The Kryptonian watched him approach with something approaching respect. "Brave boy. Stupid, but brave." "I'm Anakin Skywalker's son," Luke replied, stopping just outside the reality anchor. Bravery and stupidity run in the family. He closed his eyes and released everything. All his fear, all his power, all his attachment to existence itself. The Force flowed through him without obstruction, and he became a conduit rather than a practitioner. Light and dark merged in his body, using him as the bridge to complete the ritual. Vader felt his son's life force begin to fade and acted on pure instinct. He abandoned his position in the circle, rushing toward Luke, his connection to the dark side momentarily forgotten in the face of losing his child. "Luke, no! I won't lose you like I lost your mother. I won't." Vader reached Luke and grabbed him, pulling him away from the ritual's focal point. But in doing so, he placed himself between the working and Superman. The dimensional rejection, needing an anchor, found one: Darth Vader, connected to both light and dark through his son, powerful enough to channel the ritual's full force. The Force erupted through Vader's body. His armor cracked, his cybernetics failed, his damaged flesh began to unmake itself at the molecular level. But through it all, he maintained his connection to Luke, using their bond to anchor himself against dissolution. "Father!" Luke screamed, trying to pull Vader back. "No." Vader gasped, his vocabulary failing, his natural voice emerging for the first time in decades. This is how it should be. How it was always meant to be. I failed you, failed your mother, failed the galaxy." His grip on Luke tightened. But not this time. Not anymore. The dimensional rejection reached critical intensity. Reality itself bent around Superman, trying to reject his existence, to push him back to whatever universe had spawned him. But the Kryptonian's power was too great. His connection to this galaxy's solar radiation too established. The ritual was failing, the forces involved exceeding what any working could contain. And in that moment of ultimate crisis, Darth Vader made his final choice. He released the dark side completely. Decades of hatred, pain, and suffering, all of it, purged in an instant. And in the space it left, something else emerged. Anakin Skywalker, broken but present, choosing for the first time in years to do something purely good without expectation of reward. "I love you, son," Anakin whispered through his destroyed respirator. "Tell your sister, tell Leia I'm sorry. Sorry for everything." Then he released all the power he'd ever possessed directly into the ritual. Not dark side energy, not even light side, just pure force. The energy that had made him the chosen one, the power that had always been his birthright, finally used for its intended purpose. The dimensional rejection succeeded. Reality rejected Superman's existence with such violence that space-time itself screamed. The Kryptonian felt himself being torn from this galaxy, his molecular structure unmade and reconstructed simultaneously in another dimension. He tried to resist, channeling his full power against the rejection, but it was like trying to punch an idea. He had nothing physical to strike against. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Superman felt genuine fear. He was thrown backward through dimensional barriers, through the void between universes, his consciousness fragmenting across impossible distances. Behind him, Malachor 5 exploded, the ritual's backlash consuming the entire planet. Millions of tons of rock and ancient Sith architecture scattered across space in an expanding debris field. And at the center of it all, where Vader had stood, there was nothing, not even ashes. Just empty space where the Chosen One had made his final sacrifice. Luke Skywalker floated in the void, held aloft by his connection to the Force, tears streaming down his face. Around him, the surviving practitioners drifted in escape pods and ships. Barely a dozen remained from the original 18. Palpatine's shuttle fled toward hyperspace, the Emperor's laughter echoing through the Force even in retreat. They'd won. Superman was gone, cast back to whatever dimension had spawned him. But the cost? Luke cradled the broken remnants of his father's mask. The only physical evidence that Anakin Skywalker had existed had redeemed himself in the final moment. Through the Force, Luke could still feel an echo of his father's presence, a whisper that seemed to say, "The Force will be with you, always." Leia's voice came through his comlink, frantic with concern. "Luke, Luke, respond! We're picking up your beacon. Hold on." The Millennium Falcon appeared, Han's piloting, bringing it alongside Luke's drifting form. The cargo bay opened, and Chewbacca's strong arms pulled him inside. Luke collapsed on the deck, the mask still clutched in his hands, his body trembling with exhaustion and grief. "Is he gone?" Han asked quietly. "Superman, is he really gone?" "Yes," Luke whispered. "He's gone. We won." But as the words left his mouth, Luke knew with terrible certainty that they hadn't won. They'd survived. They'd bought themselves time. But somewhere, in another dimension or reality, Superman existed still. Changed, perhaps. Weakened, possibly. But alive. And beings like Superman didn't forget, didn't forgive, didn't stop. Someday, somehow, he might find a way back. And when that day came, the galaxy would need to be ready. For now, though, there was only grief and relief mingled together. The bittersweet knowledge that they'd lost everything to save everyone. Luke closed his eyes and let the tears come, mourning the father he'd barely known, but loved nonetheless. The chosen one who'd fulfilled his destiny in the only way that mattered. Not through power, but through sacrifice. The Force whispered comfort through his pain. And somewhere in that whisper, Luke could have sworn he heard Anakin's voice one last time. "Thank you, my son, for believing there was still good in me. You were right." 6 months after Malachor Feth's destruction, the galaxy remained in cautious, fragile peace. The Imperial palace on Coruscant had been rebuilt, its facade no longer bearing Superman's carved symbol, though workers reported hearing strange sounds at night from where the mark had been, as if reality itself remembered the wound. Emperor Palpatine ruled from his restored throne, his body more withered than ever from the ritual's toll, but his yellow eyes still gleaming with malevolent intelligence. The Rebel Alliance had fractured in the aftermath. Some factions celebrated Superman's banishment as proof that unity could overcome any threat. Others argued bitterly that cooperating with Palpatine had compromised their principles beyond redemption. Mon Mothma worked tirelessly to hold the movement together, but the cracks showed. And throughout the galaxy, people whispered about the day the sky had burned, when an alien god had nearly consumed everything before being cast back into the void. Luke Skywalker stood on the observation deck of the new Rebel flagship, staring out at the stars. His Jedi training had accelerated in the months since Malachor. The Grey Force techniques he'd discovered during the ritual had opened pathways to understanding that transcended traditional light or dark side teachings. He was becoming something unprecedented, a Jedi who understood both philosophies without being consumed by either. But the knowledge brought no comfort, only responsibility. "You're brooding again," Leia said, approaching from behind, She'd grown harder in recent months, her diplomatic smile now edged with steel forged in crisis. Han says it's your default setting now. Han talks too much, Luke replied without turning. He's worried about you. We all are. Leia stood beside him, following his gaze to the stars. You've barely slept since Malachor, barely eaten. It's like you're waiting for something. I am. Luke's hand unconsciously moved to where his father's lightsaber hung at his belt. He'd constructed a new weapon, but kept Anakin's as a reminder. The ritual worked, but not completely. I can still feel echoes, disturbances in the Force that shouldn't exist. Leia's expression darkened. You think Superman could come back? I know he could. Luke finally turned to face her. We didn't destroy him, Leia. We pushed him away, but he's still out there somewhere. In another dimension, another reality. And beings with that much power don't just accept defeat. Then we prepare, Leia said firmly. We've done the impossible once. We can do it again. Can we? Luke's question hung heavy between them. The ritual required 18 Force users. Only 11 survived. Father sacrificed everything to make it work. And Palpatine? He shook his head. The Emperor's already consolidating power, using the crisis to justify increased military buildup. He's turning Superman's threat into an excuse for tyranny. Which is why the rebellion matters more than ever, Leia countered. We can't let one tyrant be replaced by another, even if that tyrant claims to be protecting us. A proximity alarm sounded. Both Skywalkers tensed reflexively. Since Malachor, everyone jumped at sudden alerts. But this was routine. An incoming transmission from Rebel intelligence, tagged as urgent but not emergency level. They made their way to the command center where Mon Mothma was already reviewing the data. Her expression was grave. We've received reports from our agents embedded in Imperial research facilities. Mon Mothma began without preamble. Palpatine has initiated something called Project Resurrection. It appears to be an attempt to study the dimensional barriers that were weakened during the ritual. Luke felt cold dread settling in his stomach. He's trying to understand how Superman was banished. Worse, Mon Mothma replied. He's trying to replicate the dimensional breach. Our intelligence suggests he wants to weaponize it, create controlled rifts that could banish entire fleets or even planets to other dimensions. That's insane, Leia breathed. The backlash from the Malachor ritual nearly killed everyone involved. Attempting it on a larger scale could tear apart reality itself. Luke finished. The Emperor doesn't care. He tasted that level of power, and now he wants more. Han Solo arrived, Chewbacca in tow. Please tell me we're not about to fight another reality-bending monster, because I've hit my quota for those this year. Not a monster, Mon Mothma said quietly. But perhaps something worse. A man who thinks he can control forces he doesn't understand. The discussion was interrupted by another alert. This one genuinely urgent. Every screen in the command center lit up with warnings. A massive energy signature had appeared in the outer rim, at the edges of known space. Not a ship, not a natural phenomenon, a dimensional rift. Luke's blood turned to ice. Through the Force, he felt it. Something pushing against the barriers between realities, testing for weaknesses, searching for a way back. It's him, Luke whispered. Superman. He's trying to return. The command center erupted in controlled chaos. Mon Mothma immediately ordered all available Rebel assets to converge on the coordinates. Leia worked the communication channels, alerting Allied systems. Han prepped the Falcon for immediate departure. But Luke stood frozen, the Force showing him fragments of possible futures. In some, the rift sealed, and Superman remained banished. In others, he broke through and consumed the galaxy with renewed fury. And in a handful, terrifyingly few, there was a third path, one that required impossible choices and unbearable sacrifices. Luke, Mon Mothma's voice pulled him back to the present. What do we do? Luke thought of his father's final words, of Anakin Skywalker choosing redemption over power, of the lesson burned into Luke's soul during those final moments, that true strength wasn't about dominating others, but about sacrificing yourself for what mattered. We go to the rift, Luke said firmly, not to fight Superman, but to give him a choice. A choice. Leia looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Luke, he tried to enslave the entire galaxy because he believed that was the only way to bring order. Luke interrupted. But what if we showed him another path? What if instead of banishing him again, we offered him something different? Purpose without domination, power used for protection rather than control. Han shook his head vigorously. Kid, you can't reform someone like that. He's not Vader. He wasn't corrupted by outside forces. He chose to be what he is. Did he? Luke challenged. We never asked why he became what he was. What broke him in his own universe? What drove him to abandon heroism for tyranny? He looked around at the assembled leaders. Everyone can be redeemed. Father proved that. If there's even a chance, then we take it, came a familiar mechanical voice. Everyone spun to find a holographic projection of Darth Vader materializing in the command center. No, not Vader. The armor was different, lighter, and the voice, while still mechanically assisted, carried different inflections. Impossible, Mon Mothma breathed. Lord Vader died at Malachor. Vader did, the figure confirmed. But Anakin Skywalker lives. Barely. The ritual's backlash should have killed me completely. But my son's connection to the Force, it anchored part of my consciousness before total dissolution. Luke moved closer to the hologram, tears streaming down his face. Father, you're alive? Alive is a generous term, Anakin replied. I exist now as a Force ghost. Consciousness without body, trapped between life and death. It's uncomfortable, but it gives me a unique perspective. The hologram turned to address the entire command center. Luke is right. Superman can be reached. I've spent these months reaching across dimensions through the Force, touching his consciousness. He's not evil. He's broken. Something in his universe destroyed his faith in heroism, in hope. He came here seeking to impose order because he believes it's the only way to prevent suffering. That doesn't excuse what he did, Leia said coldly. No, Anakin agreed. But it explains it. And understanding is the first step to redemption. The hologram's hand reached toward Luke, though it couldn't make physical contact. My son learned that lesson well. Now the galaxy must learn it too. Mon Mothma studied the data from the outer rim. The dimensional rift was growing, stabilizing. In hours, maybe less, Superman would have a pathway back. They needed to decide: seal the rift and hope he stayed banished, or attempt something unprecedented. If we're going to offer him a choice, Mon Mothma said slowly, what exactly are we offering? He won't simply agree to leave peacefully. Luke's eyes hardened with determination. We offer him what he wanted, a way to bring order and end suffering. But not through domination, through cooperation. The galaxy has external threats we've barely explored. The unknown regions, the threat of extragalactic invasions, ancient evils sealed away by the Jedi. Superman wanted purpose. We give him real purpose, as a protector against threats no conventional force can handle. You're suggesting we recruit him? Han said incredulously. After everything? I'm suggesting we give him what Palpatine never gave me, what the Jedi never gave my father. A genuine chance at redemption without conditions or manipulation. Luke's voice carried absolute conviction. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it might fail. But if there's even the smallest possibility of turning Superman from a conqueror into a genuine hero, isn't that worth the risk? Silence filled the command center as everyone processed the insanity of what Luke proposed. It was Leia who finally spoke. If we do this, if we go to that rift and offer Superman redemption, we need safeguards, ways to stop him if he betrays us, and we need allies beyond just the rebellion. The Emperor, Mon Mothma said, the words clearly painful. If we're attempting this, Palpatine must be involved. He has knowledge of the dimensional barriers that could seal the rift permanently if Superman refuses the offer. Luke nodded. I'll contact him. This transcends our conflict. Either we unite the galaxy one more time, or we risk losing it forever. As the rebel leaders dispersed to their duties, Luke remained in the command center with Anakin's hologram, father and son, reunited in the strangest way possible. Will this work? Luke asked quietly. Can someone like Superman truly be redeemed? Anakin's hologram flickered, its features momentarily showing the young man he'd been before Mustafar. I slaughtered younglings, Luke. I hunted Jedi across the galaxy. I tortured your sister. For decades, I served a Sith Lord and brought misery to billions. If I could find redemption in my final moments, then anyone can. Anyone. But you had me, Luke said. You had someone who believed in you despite everything. Who does Superman have? He has you, Anakin replied simply. My son, who saw good in the galaxy's greatest monster and refused to give up on him. If anyone can reach Superman, it's you. Luke closed his eyes, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He was 24 years old. He'd lost his mentor, discovered his father, helped banish a god, and now carried the responsibility of perhaps the galaxy's most important decision. The Force whispered through him, not showing the future, but offering something more important. Faith. Faith that doing the right thing mattered, even when the outcome was uncertain. Faith that redemption was always possible, even for the worst among them. Then I'll try, Luke said, opening his eyes with renewed determination. May the Force be with us all. Always, Anakin's ghost replied, fading as his limited energy depleted. Always. The Millennium Falcon jumped to hyperspace, carrying Luke Skywalker toward a dimensional rift at the edge of known space. Behind him, the Rebel fleet mobilized. Ahead of him, even the Imperial Navy moved into position. Palpatine had agreed to the gambit, though his motivations remained characteristically opaque. And beyond the rift, in a dimension of pain and isolation, Superman felt the barriers weakening, felt the pathway back to the galaxy that had banished him. His power, diminished by dimensional displacement, began to restore itself as he absorbed exotic energies from the void between realities. 6 months ago, he would have returned with vengeance as his only purpose. But something had changed during his exile. In the absolute solitude of dimensional limbo, Superman had been forced to confront what he'd become, to examine the choices that had led him from hero to tyrant. And for the first time in years, Kal-El of Krypton, not Superman the Conqueror, but Clark Kent the farm boy raised with good Kansas values, wondered if there might be another way. The dimensional rift pulsed, growing wider. Reality prepared itself for the return of a god. And in the space between dimensions, two forces approached collision, one seeking redemption, the other offering it. What happened next would determine not just the fate of one galaxy, but the nature of power itself. Whether absolute strength inevitably corrupted, or whether even gods could choose to be better than their worst impulses. The Force held its breath, and the galaxy waited to see if hope could survive contact with inevitability. The dimensional rift sealed 3 days later, its closure witnessed by every faction in the galaxy. What transpired during those final negotiations remains classified, known only to those present. Luke Skywalker, Emperor Palpatine, Mon Mothma, and the being who emerged from the void. Not as Superman the Conqueror, but as something else entirely. The official record states that Superman chose exile over conflict, agreeing to patrol the unknown regions and face threats beyond the galaxy's borders in exchange for amnesty. Unofficially, those who were there speak of a broken god who knelt before a farm boy and asked for forgiveness, who accepted penance not through domination, but through service. The galaxy would never be the same. The Empire continued under Palpatine's rule, but chastened by the knowledge that even ultimate power could be challenged. The rebellion fought on, their moral authority strengthened by choosing redemption over revenge. And in the unknown regions, a red and blue figure patrolled the void, no longer seeking to conquer, but to protect. Anakin Skywalker's sacrifice became legend. The chosen one who fulfilled his destiny not through victory, but through demonstrating that anyone, even the worst among them, could choose to be better. Luke built a new Jedi Order on that principle, one that acknowledged darkness without being consumed by it. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the stars aligned just right, Force-sensitive beings reported hearing a voice across the void, deep and resonant, once filled with arrogance, but now carrying only weary determination. I am not your conqueror. I am not your god. I am simply a man with power, trying to use it for something that matters. And that will have to be enough. The galaxy far, far away had survived its greatest threat not by destroying it, but by transforming it. The lesson resonated across generations, that power without compassion was tyranny, but power tempered by redemption could be salvation itself. Luke Skywalker would tell this story to his students, ending always with the same words. The Force binds all living things, even those from beyond the stars. And if we remain true to hope, if we refuse to surrender to darkness, then no evil is ever truly beyond redemption. May the Force be with you, and may it guide even the mightiest among us toward the light.